6. Some announcements. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the cable channels. It's also accessible by remote participation. Zoom information is listed on the agenda. 2023 Summer Bandstand Concert Series continues on Thursdays at 6:30. The list of performers is on the town website. Call for volunteers. We have several positions on boards, committees, and commissions. Of particular note is we need a finance committee member. So if anybody has an interest in learning about the town and finances, that would be a great opportunity. And finally, a reminder to subscribe for emailed town agendas, news, and announcements at wwnewbury.org/subscribe. One of those announcements came out today that I just want to call attention to. We had an Eagle Scout candidate complete work at the Riverbend Trail area. Jack Rao, his family, the Judson family, the Snow family, all worked on different maintenance projects behind the Page School. Trail markers, repairing the sign for the mill and the dam, straightening posts, holding blazes, and clearing vegetation. So I want to thank Jack and his family especially for doing that work, and congratulations to him for earning his Eagle Scout. I also want to point out that Michelle Green, our conservation agent, worked with Jack and his family on this. That's definitely above and beyond the conservation agent's responsibilities, and we really appreciate her working with the interns and working with our youth. It's really a great effort on her part. So regular business, item A, update regarding Eastern Essex District Department of Veteran Services. Ron Ross, who is our representative for West Newbury.
Ma'am, good evening, everybody. Just kind of give an update. Everyone knows Karen Tyler. She's been the VSO for the entire district for the past 8 years. On the 16th of July, she resigned from the position. She'll stay in the position until the 31st of July. So there's full coverage for the Veterans Office until that date. We have a meeting scheduled for this Wednesday. We'll review resumes and how we're going to potentially fill that billet, because that's a contracted bill that has to get filled and has to be by a veteran. They have several names already, but that will take some time. We don't fear that there will be a gap. Karen Bell has been there for a few years now. There's certain things she can and cannot do. I volunteered to pick up any of the slack that, as a veteran, to fill out the specific forms. I know how to do all that, and I've done it many times before. So on Wednesday, we'll determine what they'll need for me to fill in for the gaps until a new person is hired and brought on fully to fill that position. So again, we don't fear that the veterans will not be taken care of, because we have enough of us to help fill that gap for the interim. Also, Bob Snow, who was the chairman for the district, he also resigned, citing that he was overworked with the town. His position has been filled by Sherry David, and we'll meet her on this Wednesday evening. Again, those are current updates. Once we have a person or candidate that's been selected and voted upon, I'll update the board and everything we're doing. I'll also let you know what days, if they need me to fill in for here once a month for this office here, and any other ones. Again, I volunteered to pick up the slack, whatever needs to be done. So again, we'll cover all the gaps. There shouldn't be any services that can't be provided for veterans. So we should be in good shape until the person comes on board.
Thank you for picking up the slack.
Oh yeah, that's no problem.
Newbury as well.
Ron, this is Rick Parker. I'm participating remotely, and I just wanted to say thanks for really going way above and beyond the role, our town's role in this historically. You're really picking up the slack. It's great. Thank you.
But we'll keep you updated.
Okay, I just have a question. What is the process for? Is this position is advertised?
It just means it'll be advertised just like it was in the past. There's the board selection process, a review of the resumes. It has to be, the certain criteria the individual has to have. They have to be a veteran, 100%. They can't just be anybody. That position there requires a veteran to fill it. And then the board members that are there will review everything, have interviews, and then the selection process will take place.
Great.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the update.
Yes, sir.
John, I know in the past, at one point a while back, Karen had contacted me to see about bringing attention to a job posting that she had in the office. Once that job is posted, let me know. We'll make sure to put it up on the town
Yes, sir.
website and the town social media as well.
Great.
That'll help bring some
Yes, sir.
attention to it.
Sounds great. All right, sir, I'll do that. Any other questions?
No, Chris, do you have any questions?
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure.
Item B, request for appointment to Conservation Commission. We have two applicants in the packet, Haley McCraven and Alejandra Chandler. Hi, nice to meet you. Is Haley online?
Yes, she's on the Zoom.
I am.
Hi, Haley. Do you want to just introduce yourself? Hello.
Sure. So as I said, my name is Haley McCraven. My husband and I moved to West Newbury in 2021. I'm from the original area. I grew up in Ipswich, went to high school in Newburyport, and did my graduate MBA in Boston and then undergrad down in Bristol, Rhode Island. I currently work for PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's a tax audit and consulting firm in Boston. Been there about 9 years in their consulting practice, focusing on clients in the energy sector. And then prior to moving to West Newbury, I had lived in Beacon Hill for about 6 years and had served on the board of the Junior League of Boston, it's a nonprofit organization in the city. And just got drawn into doing some volunteer work, and during COVID shifted that focus from my nonprofit work in the city to having lived up here and looking to get involved in the conservation space, and was lucky enough to see this opening. So that's kind of what brought me here tonight.
Yeah, great. Rick, or Chris, do you have any questions?
It's sort of a tooth question. I will endorse you obviously for this conservation commission, but I sort of looked at your resume and said, hey, what about finance committee?
Same thought.
So, out there, and with your background, I personally prefer to see you there. The only problem is when you're on finance committee, you can't be on other committees in town. So, yeah, your preference, twist your arm. I'd love to see you on FinCom.
Well, if I'm allowed, if I could give it a whirl on the conservation committee, I'd love to try. My family actually kind of laughed and said the same thing of, would I try my hand at the finance council? And I'd certainly like to at some point. So I'd like to stay involved if I can.
Right, yeah, I mean, Haley, I just want to say it's great that you're getting involved, just period, just the fact that you're throwing the hat in the ring for something, it's great.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad wherever I can give some time, I think everyone benefits from it. So it's great.
Right.
Haley, do you currently have any issues before the commission?
No.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess I wouldn't even know what the issue is, but no, there shouldn't be anything there.
Okay, great. So we also have another applicant. There's one position open, so I think we should speak with both people and then kind of make a determination. So Alejandra, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Alejandra. I moved to West Newbury about 3 months ago. I was living in Merrimack. I was in the Conservation Commission in Merrimack for a year. I have a bachelor's in science and environmental science, conservation, and natural resources. I'm doing a master's in science such as public and environmental engineering. My work is as a sustainability coordinator. It mainly focuses on waste reduction for the hospitality business and within the corporate setting of the company. As you can see on my resume, I've worked single-handedly to be able to reduce carbon emissions by myself. My department is just me at work. Besides that, I've been involved in numerous environmental activities back home. I'm from Colombia, and after I moved here, I kept working on my environmental volunteering and work. Merrimack, now I'm trying to get in here and school and whatnot.
Mhm. So how long were you on the commission in Merrimack?
For 1 year, I only lived there 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You certainly seem to have the right background for it.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I the learning those.
Yeah. Any questions, Chris?
I didn't know we just one position available, now really.
Yeah. Rick, any questions for Alejandra?
No, I would just note, as you did already, that Alejandra, your background is particularly seems particularly suited for Conservation Commission. Both the fact that you have experience on another Conservation Commission and and your educational background. Yeah, this it's tough having to make a decision between two great people.
One of whom has a great background in finance. Yeah,
Speaking as the chair of the finance
speaking as
committee?
the chair and being impressed by both candidates.
Yeah.
So,
But,
hey,
if
Haley.
I were putting a team together, I might go with each applicant's particular strength.
Yeah, if we nominated you for FinCom, Haley, would you accept that position?
Please.
Sorry. Can you repeat the statement? Sorry.
Yes, if we decided we prefer to have you on FinCom and nominated you for that position, would you accept that?
How long or what's the commitment like for that one? I didn't get a chance to look through that one.
Well, I think it's a 3-year commitment that's open. And generally what they do, because I was on that before I got here, and Rob is the chair, so he can explain it too, but you make the recommendations to the town meeting, you listen to all the parties and what they're looking for, you assist in putting the booklet together. That's the spring and the fall town meeting. And the current finance committee has become more involved throughout the year, and they meet once a month, Rob, maybe, if that.
Sure, we have 2 seasons,
Okay.
so you're working
Yeah.
for, yes, so our first season would be for the fall, that starts in September, it's over in October. Second season starts just about February, and that's over, kind of like end of April, beginning of May. So those are weekly meetings during season. Outside of
Yep.
season, it's much less intense, way less intense. So that's why I point out the season, that's really when you're really in attendance.
Not to give the sales pitch
Yeah.
too hard, but I've been on the FinCom
Yeah.
previously. I've been on a lot of boards and committees in town. And I found that the most enjoyable one I've done in 29 years, so,
Instead of board.
so far.
So
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to take that, Chris.
So.
All right, so this is all great, but I do want to point out that should Haley consider finance committee, she still has to put an application in, so we can't really.
Does she?
Yeah, doesn't she?
Technically, you can appoint anyone.
Yeah, you can,
All right. All right, let's, all right, Haley, would you consider it?
I guess I'll be honest, guys. I mean, Alejandra, you've got the great qualifications for conservation. So to me, that's kind of a no-brainer in that case. And then I certainly can take a look at the finance opportunity, another point in time here. So I certainly would consider it. I think I just need to do some homework before I commit.
Okay, fair enough.
fair enough.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to have Alejandra Vieira nominate to Conservation Commission.
All right, I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor?
I
Aye.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all.
appreciate you volunteering.
Well,
Thank you.
Yeah,
Have a great night.
great.
Hey, before we lose Haley, if Haley hasn't already signed off,
You already
Yeah,
said-
yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you are.
Rob, when is the next FinCom scheduled for, Rob?
Wednesday, the 16th in August.
Okay, so Haley, if it was of interest to you, if you were curious about the committee, and if you're available, then you might just sit in on some portion of the
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah. I wrote that down, so I should be around. I'll just let you guys know if I can come by for that. That would be great. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Right.
We start at 6.
Thank you.
All right,
6
thank
o'clock.
you, Haley.
Okay. Thanks,
And then-
guys. Take care.
Okay, have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And to Alejandra, our town clerk, Jim Blatchford, will be in touch to see about getting you sworn in and, backup documents. And open meeting laws.
Okay,
Great.
that's great.
Thank you. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
All right, we have solved the problem.
So,
All right, item C, request for authorization to pursue grant opportunities required. Computers and police cruisers. Actually, item D as well is another grants. Floor is yours.
Standing all day, so I'm sitting. Yeah, so we're looking for permission, I'm looking for permission to work with the town manager to look at these 2 grants that have come up. One of them is due the end of this month. That is for body cameras. We're looking at, we beta tested them 4 or 5 years ago. And it worked out okay. The technology was not really there yet. So we revisited that this year, early part of this year. And we were just hoping that some grant opportunity would come along. They had done some last year, which basically paid for you to start your own program. So we're looking at applying for that grant this year to do that. It happens to be the year that we need to look at replacing our tasers, which are also part of some of the companies that manufacture body cameras. So we're looking at sort of a package deal to sort of bring the pricing down as well. But obviously there's some funding things that we're gonna need to look at. It's a reimbursement grant. So we need to work with Angus and his team to see what would work out best for us. One of the variables right now is cloud storage or local storage for all the video, because we'd have to maintain it. We should have some pricing tomorrow, which will give us an understanding of where that will affect our budget as well. So we're looking at the reimbursement grant, see if that would fit us. We've pretty much met all the requirements for the grant to apply for it. So we're gonna look at what kind of cost that's gonna be for the town. And then we're gonna look at going forward, how much of an impact that would be on our budget. I think it's a great program. I think it's great for transparency and community relations. And more officers nowadays are actually interested in us having body cams.
Interesting.
That's a big positive.
Is this required by the new police standards in Massachusetts, or can you
So,
speak to that?
They want to get to that level
Okay.
where all departments have it. And again, it hurts the smaller departments like us, because we're gonna have to assign somebody to be responsible for those records, to do all the maintenance and upkeep and upgrades and everything that goes along with technology. And then it's gonna be an impact on our budget. But this is an important one for us.
And would this fully outfit all officers?
So it would allow us to create a program. So right now we're looking at, we don't believe that it's necessary to assign one to an officer to have at all times. We're gonna, it's gonna be a check-in, check-out type situation.
Yeah.
So we're looking at what the costs are gonna be for the equipment. But the biggest impact is definitely gonna be the cost for storage. But we're gonna look at what's gonna be best for us and most manageable for us as well.
Yeah.
The second grant is a technology grant that is not.
Before you go into that, Rick, Chris, do you have any questions on the body camera grant? That's item D.
Actually, I do have one question, Mike. How long are you supposed to hold on to that data? Is it forever, or is there, that, I guess it's a question.
Yeah, so the grant is asking us to put together a plan for retention. Obviously, that would have a lot to do with storage space, but we would comply with whatever. I mean, I don't know exactly what the retention period is right now for video, but we would always obviously have to meet that standards.
I'm not that up on retention.
Yeah, no,
schedules.
and I don't have the answer either for that, so.
Yeah,
I thought I remembered hearing something about that if, that it was retained for a certain period of time, but if there wasn't a request within that time, that there was kind of a rolling ability to discard it, just because would be really, it would build up exponentially. But whatever the law says is whatever the department.
When you get an answer to the question, you'll know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of privacy things that we need to work out too, as far as, you know, juveniles, private property permissions, that sort of stuff, but.
So how does the cost structure work? If you apply for the grant, is that covered? I just wanna know, once you own these, what's the town's financial obligation moving forward from that point?
Exactly. Yeah, we're looking at that right now with the vendor that we're working with. Just have them break down those initial costs. And again, the big one is gonna be replacement costs over how many years.
Because once you own them, you're gonna own them forever. So-
Yeah, and I'm sure they have great, lease options too, but that's not gonna help a town our size, a department our size. So by tomorrow, we should have the biggest information answered, which is cloud storage. And working with the town manager, I think we'll be able to determine if it's feasible to go forward this year or push it off another year.
I mean, in rough term, I use say cloud storage, to me, it's a nebulous term, what? $1,000 a year, $100,000 a year?
It's probably more, but we don't have an exact number just yet.
Are the offices? I know previously cams have been a real issue. Any need to negotiate anything with the unions, or is this something they just take them and wear them and it's good?
No, we would work on that, but again, all the officers are in favor of it, which is great. So I don't anticipate that being a problem, but we'll take the steps that are necessary with the union.
I just don't want to get caught.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
So then the motion would be to approve the grant application, I guess.
To authorize submittal of the grant application, and for the reimbursement grant, those funds would need to be appropriated before they could be used, so that would need to be put on as a, this should be for the body cam one for
The fall town meeting.
a fall town meeting article.
So how would that work with the
Full
grant
amount.
application? I mean, you could still apply for the grant pending approval of the warrant article.
Yeah, we would clear that with the representative from the state.
Okay.
If that would be okay, because I'm sure they understand that communities have the vote, so.
Okay, and do you envision applying for the maximum, 50,000 or?
We're gonna look to see what fits us best,
Okay.
yeah, because again, to Chris's point, we don't wanna have, 10 cameras that we're gonna have to replace in 6 years.
Any questions or comments from people in attendance?
I actually do have one more question. Mike, you said you looked into this 3 or 4 years ago, and I vaguely recall, I think that was Jeff Durand who was involved with that, or I recall having a conversation with Jeff at that point. And it seemed like it was fairly expensive then. I'm assuming the cost of the cameras is headed downward or has been headed downward.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more vendors out there that offer the same or similar type product, so it's really a lot more, the prices have come down, but with anything with technology and the clientele such as municipalities, it's always gonna be a challenge, but we're testing out some other manufacturers to see if their, usability and durability is right up there with the vendor we're looking to go into. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Motion?
Make a motion to authorize the police chief to pursue the grant. Thank you, in conjunction with the town manager.
Second, any further discussion?
I couldn't actually hear Chris's motion.
To authorize the police chief to pursue the grant for the body cams in conjunction with the town manager.
Thank you.
I seconded. All right, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Are you having trouble hearing, Rick?
Just sometimes, but most of the time it's okay.
Okay. All right, the other grant.
Second grant,
Yeah.
this one is a little bit better on a timeline, it's the end of August. And this is a grant for technology needs for the police department, so we're looking at applying for that to replace our mobile computers in all of our cruisers. which we've had now for quite some time. So they're definitely due for an upgrade.
Mhm.
So we're looking at this grant to offset the cost of the town, to have those at minimum. Laptop computers and or tablets and meeting equipment, as well as the connectivity equipment to Verizon Wireless.
Any questions?
Any other costs would be above and beyond the grant? I mean, software or anything like that, is it all inclusive?
We're looking at everything, including installation, and then any of the maintenance down the road would just be absorbed in our budget.
Rick, any questions?
No,
Make a motion to authorize the police chief to pursue the grant to replace the computers and the cruisers, but just for the town manager.
Right.
second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Great.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Are you here for the select board meeting or commission conservation?
Conservation.
It's in the second floor here.
Every meeting.
Yeah, we need to do something. This is the third meeting.
You gotta have a
Yeah.
snack sometime.
They just started, so you should be all
Yeah,
set.
thank you.
Yeah.
You know how I got? Don't figure it out this way. Then take it right out. Right. Well,
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, item E, follow-up regarding the Emerald Ash Borer Tree Injection Program.
Right, I'll just preface briefly and then turn it over to Fred. So as you know, the amount authorized at town meeting was just over 60,000, 60,180. We went out for our RFP process. The contract was awarded to Bartlett Tree for actually 27,930, so way below the budget. So Fred had approached me to see about whether it would be within the scope of the article to use some of the balance of the article funds to do follow-up monitoring as to the effectiveness of the treatments that took place in late June. So do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, and I did want to thank Caitlin Bradstreet and Angus in particular for helping get that invitation to bid and the contract out in a timely way, because injecting the trees before July was important in terms of maximizing the effectiveness. That being said, we have completed the program as of June 30th, which is great. Injected 177 trees. Unfortunately, we had that winter freeze and the drought last summer. And so we have, we know we're going to lose some of the 177 anyway, just because they, even though they appeared okay a year ago, you know, we are where we are. But we're optimistic, and I know Chris has mentioned this, it's important for us to follow up to see, you know, what's next, if anything. And so the idea is to have those 177 trees looked at in probably early October, before the leaves are down, to see what assessment we can make in terms of how many would benefit from re-injection, how many are continuing down a spiral towards, you know, ultimate fatality. And so the idea here is to revisit those trees in October. And from what I understand from Bartlett's, they have tagged all, you know, they have GPS locations for all those trees, and they have put the little tags on the trees. So they know very well where these trees are. It's can be a fairly quick survey, if you will. And then, depending on what the outcome of the assessment is, we come to the board probably early next spring and say, or whenever, and say, here's some options that we have. And if we think that some trees can benefit from a re-injection, given the numbers that Angus just told you about, we certainly would have some money to re-inject next year if we thought that was useful. And that would all be within the calendar year, the fiscal year for which the monies were approved. Because that, if there was any reinjection, it would happen, next May, probably. Not, we won't go as late as June. It would be better to do a little bit earlier. So that's the idea. And I talked with the Bartlett's tree experts well, first off, I agree with Angus. I've taken a look at the motion that was made and the article that was passed. And it establishes a program for injecting the trees. So this kind of follow-up assessment not only makes good sense, but is within the scope of the article, at least as we read it. So we didn't want to go ahead, and I've talked with Angus about it. We didn't want to go ahead with contacting Bartlett's to get a quote from them on what this kind of follow-up evaluation in, let's just say, October, what that would cost. But it certainly would be less than prior surveys, because all the trees are marked and well known. And as I understand it, this would be something that could go out, and Angus, I don't mean to misspeak, but could go out as is the right term, sole source or?
Yeah, I mean, it seems so, yeah, where they did the injections, they know all the locations.
And did the original surveys as well, so, yeah.
And what was the cost of the original survey? Just trying to get a
Well,
sense.
the original survey was for 470 something trees, and I think it ran $36,000, somewhere in there, but
Yeah, 33.6.
33.6, but that was before anybody knew where the trees were.
Right.
Now they've been located, they've been visited once, so it should be a fairly quick, I mean, I don't want to, I think it would be much less. So that's the idea. I don't know whether we need, your approval or not, but the board's approval. We certainly wanted to let you know what our thinking was at this point in terms of follow-up and what that might lead to next spring.
Yeah, I'm curious, like how much money we're talking about. I know you won't know that.
For the follow-up assessment.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it falls within the scope, but I don't want to go too far with using money if it's not.
Well, see, I'm uncomfortable with mentioning anything definitive, but my understanding is it's likely, or it would be reasonable to assume that it's less than 10K.
And the injection itself was 22.
27.
And that was for 177 trees, and we know, given the drought last summer and that freakishly cold period in the wintertime where we lost trees, that we certainly don't expect to be injecting 177 in the second round. We know we're going to lose some of those, but we're trying to do the best we can to save as many as we can.
But right now, we're just talking about the monitoring, right? Which should be closer to 5 by the time.
I don't think it would be. Yeah, I think he just doesn't want to put a number.
No,
on it.
I get that.
I don't want to mislead you or somehow disadvantage Bartlett's. But as you can see from the quote, the money that they charged us for the injection of 177 trees, they were less than half of the other bid that came in. So, and they do a lot of work around town. So they, at least my personal view is they give us pretty reasonable pricing.
Is it possible that if the number is low enough, say if it turns out to be, $2,000 or $3,000, that there would be money in the DPW budget under the tree warden function?
So I think, Rick, you're probably referring to the highway sidewalk and trees line is where.
That's what it would be.
That often tends to actually be overspent and offset by line item transfers, and I think especially where we're in transition with the DPW leadership, I wouldn't want to, say that that's available in the operating budget necessarily, because I know that line is always tight. But I've got the language here for the actual article. It's was to transfer from free cash, sum of $60,180 to fund an inoculation treatment program for ash trees within public rights of way against the effects of the emerald ash borer, with a sunset of the end of FY '24. So I read that, and Fred read that as, that this follow-up would not only be within the scope, but also responsive to suggestions the finance committee made, in terms of knowing how effective these are. But I definitely suggested to Fred that, we have the discussion with the board, because if there were concerns about it, I would definitely want to know that before going forward, and we wouldn't go forward, but our reading is that it's a natural follow-on to the.
I was the one with FinCom at the time that I was kind of opposed to it. But the town meeting voted it pretty enthusiastically, so at that point I said, okay, we're on board with it. And the conversation was, every 2 years you do an injection. And then Angus just read the wording of the articles. I don't think this is outside of the wording of the article. The intention is to take care of these trees and save and spend no more than $60,180. So I don't think it's a stretch. I think it's reasonable and fair to go back to town meeting is almost, I don't see why you would have to.
I don't feel like we do for the monitoring, but to re-inject, that seems
Yeah.
different to me, because the program we sold was every 2 year
But not in the
injection.
article.
No, I know, but the discussion on town meeting floor was.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And the idea, I can only give you what my professional experience being a certified arborist,
Mhm.
what my opinion is, but also what I've done on my property, which is that trees that look like they could be saved, we injected, and I'm not saying we should do this necessarily for the towns, I'm just saying what my experience was. And I worked with Bartlett, we did 2 injections in successive years, and then we started the every other year. Now, it was hard to know what the results of this were going to be, so we could have done $30,000 every other year, but it seemed like it would be better to ask for the 60 and then have it, then have the interim year when there were no injections. And that may well still be the case.
Mhm.
We just don't know. If that's why we want to do the assessment, to see if the professional recommendations are, I'm going to give you a hypothetical. Out of the 177, we lose 77 trees. They have declined past the point where it's worth re-injecting. At any point, we have 50 of the last 100 that seem to be robust and could withstand not being injected next spring, but could go another year and then see what happens. And then the other 50 might be in a category in which we think they may need some more attention if we're going to try to save them, and we're not. In other words, the decline has slowed but has not stopped. And so, but we don't know. You can create all different hypotheticals and situations, which is why this assessment is so important.
Yeah, I agree.
And I want to mention, in terms of the timing of the assessment, it's possible to do it next spring. The only issue there is when the ash trees would leaf out. And they tend to leaf out at a time when, if you do the assessment and then you make the plans, you're sort of scrunched up against that June 30th deadline yet again. And actually, when I talked with the Bartlett's person, he suggested that we do it without knowing what the financial timetable is. He suggested we do it this fall. So that's what I'm suggesting as well, that we do it this fall before the leaves drop.
The assessment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Even the re-injection, my feeling, and again, I didn't embrace the article, but the town meeting basically said, we want to spend $60,000 to have a program with an attempt to save 177 trees. So if you have the benefit of getting a favorable price, you can bring the schedule in and do it, not have to go back for more money. I think that's something I would endorse.
Mhm.
I don't know.
I agree with that.
What's the sunset date of that article?
The end of the current fiscal year, June 30th.
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable with doing something different than what was presented. I don't have a problem with the monitoring. Could we leave it to do the monitoring and then visit when you have results and a proposed plan to see?
Sure, yeah, I mean, that would be the point.
Yeah.
You know, trying to forecast ahead what the possibilities are, what the assessment might say, but yes, that's absolutely why we think this is set. I mean, I'm glad it's within the scope of the article, because that's gonna give us really, good direction on what might be the best and most effective and most timely next step.
But what happens when Fred comes back in November and says we have X amount of trees that need a re-injection?
And then we'll talk about it then.
It is something you could talk about. I don't wanna, trust me, I don't wanna be extra work, but it's something you could talk about for the fall town meeting.
Yeah,
You know, I forget the terminology, but we did this a number of years ago with the debt where we kind of retroactively broadly allowed use. Maybe you could something to propose without appropriating any additional funds to see if town meeting agreed with that the inoculation program that was funded could include multiple injections.
yeah, I mean, that could be done in
I don't know,
spring.
procedure. Yeah, it could, actually, you wouldn't lose anything by doing it in
Well,
spring, because the funds would be available.
You know, I'd have to go back over not only my fading memory, but the record. I'm pretty sure that when we presented it at the Springtown meeting, the idea was that there would be 2 injections. You know, rather than having $30,000 set aside for in successive years, that the 60,000 would take care of a first injection and then a second injection. But I can't be sure of that. You know, I don't.
Yeah, no, my recollection was that the 60 grand, that the numbers came in well below what we anticipated, and that we expected it to only support one.
And that this would be a recurring program.
Correct.
Ah, okay, then we would come back and ask if appropriate to do it again.
But if you get the assessment done, you then can respond to the assessment, and we should be all set.
Well, we certainly, you know, if we injected 177 trees for 27,000
Just
dollars.
28,000.
It seems pretty logical that, you know, that we're gonna be injecting, let's say, 100 trees. That we could certainly fit. I'm just not arguing for it. I'm just saying that we could fit that within the $60,000.
Yeah.
Not that we need to spend the money, but if that's what makes sense, the money is there to be used, or if it's not appropriate, then it gets turned back to the town.
Yeah, I mean, if we feel like we need to, you know, town approval, then, you know, Angus's suggestion of going back to, I don't know what the correct term would be, but to, you know, remotion, you know, rehear the article, and using the same funds that have already been allocated. I can't believe town meeting wouldn't agree to that. I mean, it's just, it's only rational.
Yeah,
Well, they implied by the vote on the first one that they would pay the 60 grand again.
Exactly, yeah. Right.
My suggestion would be to somehow get it on the warrant for the fall town meeting, so that we're not waiting in spring, so that if Bartlett comes in after the assessment, says it costs you this much, you can then put it up and have it ready to go come spring. You're not waiting for spring town meeting to fund it.
And that might make a lot of sense. Let me just clarify. In your opinion, would we be okay to go ahead with arranging the contract work for the assessment to take place and do that contract work before the fall town meeting?
Yes.
I think that's what I'm saying.
Okay, okay. Because that's the critical time.
Right.
And then the other is if, the only question would be if we have time to come to you, and I don't mean to prolong this unnecessarily, but if there's enough time between when the assessment is completed in October and will we have enough time to come to you to say we want to put something on the agenda for the fall town meeting?
probably not. That's why I think the Springtown meeting would be better, and you wouldn't do the injection till May anyway.
Correct, or, well, April, if we could,
Put
but,
a placeholder in the fall town meeting for it. You're come up with a.
yeah, I mean, if that's possible. It just depends on, you know, what we find with the assessments, that how, like, suppose we come in and we say we've got 20 trees that are great and 157, forget, you know.
Still coming under.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, we just wanted to bring all these moving pieces to your attention and get your viewpoints on it. at
Well,
this
it
point.
sounds like everybody's in favor of
Right.
moving ahead with the assessment, so
That's great.
can we
That-
start there and
Oh,
be
absolutely.
in touch about it?
And then
Yeah, and then-
puzzle out the rest.
Yeah, so
And then-
when in October, do you think that will happen?
I don't know, but that was the, you know, because if you go to November, the leaves are down, and September, you want to give it as long a time period as you can before the leaves drop, so
Yeah.
sometime in October.
Okay.
That shouldn't be a problem to set that up. They can do that for, once we contact Bartlett, I'm sure they can do it fairly quickly.
Okay. Great, so we don't need a motion, I guess, right?
No, it was really
Yeah.
just, yeah.
No, I think,
Yeah.
appreciate you coming in. and
Oh,
discussing it.
absolutely. No, and certainly, the next step will be what to do with all the
Right.
trees that didn't make it, and that's going to be a lot harder
Yeah,
of an issue.
right.
So, all right, well, thank you very
All
much.
right,
Thank you, Fred.
thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
Yep.
The next item is a request from Essex County Greenbelt to conduct fundraising activities and install a temporary sign. Hi, Vanessa.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Did everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Great, great.
You
Thanks
want
so
to give a description of what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, it's pretty much as outlined in the agenda and perhaps an email that Angus shared. But what we'd like to do is kind of capitalize on you know, captive audiences that are already coming to town events such as the Thursday night concerts, maybe a soccer game at Pipe Stave Hill in the fall once those run around. Let me back up. Greenbelt is ramping up our private fundraising component for the Sawmill Brook Conservation Project. So if neither of our state grants come through, Greenbelt is on the hook for half of the purchase price for Sawmill Brook, or a little over half, $355,000. That's if the town doesn't get a land grant and Greenbelt doesn't get a conservation partnership grant. Otherwise, you know, at a minimum, we're on the hook for $100,000. So, and we're committed to raising that. So what we'd like to do is have some, put out some information, have some, you know, staffed information tables at various town events, whether it's soccer games or, the music concerts, the Thursday night music concerts. Kathy Lanoy, who's our director of development, is working with a local committee of West Newbury folks who had some ideas, and those were some of their ideas. So we'd also like to put up a sign at Mill Pond, at the Mill Pond kiosk that says, you know, help Greenbelt raise the money to permanently preserve Sawmill Brook, and have kind of a QR code that people can use their phones to find out more information and donate. So in a nutshell, that's what we're hoping to do.
Okay, I think we probably should take them separately. We have an established policy for temporary signs, which I think the Pipe Stave sign would fall under. Right?
Okay.
Rick, do you have any thoughts? Does that sound like a reasonable way to handle this?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
So the temporary sign policy is total of 4 weeks, is that correct? So it could be two-week periods, but you could do it all at once within.
Okay.
So did we exclude town properties on that? So,
No, there were certain specific town
But not-
properties where it would be
not-
allowed, but
So
not.
Yeah,
what
but
about
there are half a dozen locations where we cannot specifically do it.
People are looking for these temporary signs along the
the road?
roadway.
Yeah,
So where they're proposing interior of the site, I don't recall, I'm certain the policy doesn't specify
Yeah.
anything about that.
so you might have to get approval from Greenbelt with the CR.
Okay.
I'm joking, but that's.
Uh,
You know Dave. So any concerns or questions about the sign, you guys?
Is there any size limit on it?
What type of sign are you envisioning, Vanessa? Like how
Um,
big, location specifically?
I think if we have a sign at the kiosk, I mean, we wouldn't want to cover up the kiosk, but we'd want it to be noticeable. I'm gonna guess, you know, when we were fundraising for Brown Spring Farm, we had a pretty big sign on the street, well, on the property with the, I think it was a giant corn husk that was kind of showing the fundraising. So if we had something like on the street at Mill Pond or a pipe stave or closer to the kiosk, I mean, it'd be nice. I guess I would ask if we could do something of that scale, just to show the fundraising effort.
Maybe you can do a rotary saw blade shape, use it as a pie chart that fills in.
Something like that, like a sawmill. That's,
Yeah,
we
right.
were looking for ideas, so
Yeah.
that's actually not a bad idea. Yeah, so I think what I would, so you're saying that we have to apply for a temporary sign permit? Could we put the size in the application? Because I'm not quite sure what the ultimate decision is going to be around size and sizes.
Yeah, that would be the best place to put it. So,
Okay.
because the application, you know, we review the information in the application to decide whether or not to permit it.
Okay, great. And so would we do, is it one application per property?
So actually, I don't think there is an application. It's just typically the select board has a policy and people interested in placing a sign come before us and explain what they want.
Okay.
So I don't think you need to make a separate application. We probably would want details though, in terms of the size and typically they say when the sign will be up.
Yeah, just a sketch. I don't want to find out it's, you know, a billboard up there and be surprised and then.
Yeah.
if
No.
it's 14 feet
No.
wide.
Yeah.
No, wouldn't be a billboard.
So the
Okay.
idea is the middle parking lot, have it be next to the kiosk down at Mill Pond or up at Pikes?
So what's been explained to me or described to me so far is like a sign at the Mill Pond kiosk. And if they wanted a sign also at the street, they would just submit a proposal to you with a sign for the street and what that looks like, and then a sign for the kiosk and what that looks like.
Yeah,
Okay.
with the dates of when they would be there.
Okay.
And so each of those signs, so we're now talking about two different signs, two different locations. So each of those are would be eligible for two-week periods, you know, for up to two-week periods, which could be separated or could be, you know, one continuous 4-week period.
Okay. Great.
One
And then
comment. Go ahead.
Chris?
It's gonna sound like an odd comment, but I just saw a show this weekend on security and how easily hackable QR codes are. So rather than a QR code, would it be more advisable to put up a website link?
Huh, okay. I'll talk to our development group about that.
To lead to something other than,
They can write it via phone, maybe do demonstrations and it blew your
You
mind.
go up to the sign and put a sticker over the QR code.
Or you modify the one that's there and it goes to somebody.
Oh, wow.
that really is.
Very disturbing.
That we had to go over this with the bus routes for Merrimack Valley Transit because they were gonna put out QR codes everywhere, but if somebody walks up to the QR code, slaps their sticker on it with a different QR code, now you're going to a very bad website as opposed to.
Uh-huh.
It's becoming fairly common, it's not insignificant.
Really? Wow, it's the first I've heard of that.
Yeah, me too. That's terrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how quickly does the committee want to get this going, Vanessa? I mean, if we delay approval until our next meeting, August 7th, pending the
Oh,
receipt of information, does that sound okay?
that'll be fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so August 7th is the next meeting. Okay.
And you can just submit something in writing, you don't have to attend, it's up to you, since we've already discussed it.
Okay, great.
That's the sign, and we have to do.
Right.
Great.
All right. So the second request, so when you say conduct fundraising activities, you're talking about a table with information? Or-
Yeah. Yeah, table with information and, you know, we'd have a staff person there who just, you know, if anybody comes over, we talk to them about it, why we're fundraising.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This one is more challenging for me. I just have a vision of, you know, our bucolic summer concerts being populated by tables with people selling stuff, you know? which is really not what you're doing, but, I don't know, Rick, Chris, do you have any thoughts on?
Well, so, I mean, if the town were to choose to set up something on its own, the town would clearly be able to do it for ourselves. This is, as I see it, this is kind of for ourselves. I mean, we're not staffing it, but I don't think a commercial entity could come and claim, that they needed, equal, due to, First Amendment, free speech rights, that they needed equal accessibility, because, we're really, we're teamed up on this particular acquisition with Greenbelt. I don't know, Wendy, I don't think we're setting a precedent where others are going to come expecting access. Maybe I'm wrong. I appreciate the caution, but I don't think so.
Okay,
I don't even worry about that component, because as Rick said, you're benefiting yourself with it. In my notes, when I mark up all the time, I wrote yes to fully endorse this, so.
Okay.
I personally have no problem, I think it's great because of the benefit we're getting for the work they've done, and to allow them to actually generate that revenue. I don't see a problem with that.
mhm. Do you have any idea where the tables would physically be set up? Like in the parking lot or?
I don't, because I wasn't at the meeting where it was talked about, so, I don't. I guess because we're working with local folks, we would look to them for guidance as to where, or to you for guidance as to where it should go.
Yeah, I think I would like details on where, if you're gonna do it at Pipe Save or at the, the bandstand.
Yep.
It would be good to know where, and again, when, what dates you were planning
Yep.
on. So if you could provide those details for our next meeting as well, I think we can move this along.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the irony here is that, this is a summer concert series, and the next meeting is until August 7th, and there probably are only 2 or maybe 3, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but there are at the most 3 more concerts after August 7th, whereas
Yeah.
there are 3 between now and, is that right? This Thursday, I guess there are 2 between now and August 7th. Yeah, I mean, if the goal is to use that particular series of events as the opportunity to reach out, then it's going to be a rapidly diminishing opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't know where that leaves us, but I just wanted to point that out. The other thing is that you might, or somebody might want to attend this week's just to get a sense of, placement options.
Yeah, there might be someone on the committee. As I mentioned, there are a few local West Newbury folks on our committee, so they might have attended it already.
Yeah.
I know that the fundraising group is not planning to meet again until early next week, I think Monday morning.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we'd be ready to have a table this week anyway, so.
Okay, yeah, and I'm sure you're right, that people are on now that you say that, yeah, I mean, Lark Madden played one of the first 2 shows, and yeah, so there's a connection there,
Yeah.
he and Annie, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll come back to you with details on when, and where.
Okay,
And
great.
and we'll aim for that August 7th select board meeting.
Okay, that sounds great. Any other? Okay, thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Okay, item G, continued review of draft LE Fund Program Summary and application. So we discussed this last time. We didn't actually have the draft application in the packet for people to look at. So that's in there now. It gives just a brief summary of the Elliott Fund. The purpose is to provide assistance to residents of West Newbury facing financial hardship. In order to preserve the balance of this fund for long-term use, assistance will be provided in the form of a low-interest loan rather than grants. And so that was one of the question mark items for us to discuss. Do we want to use loans versus grants for this program?
Both.
Both?
I think it depends on the situation. My
Okay.
suggestion would be at the select board's discretion, could be a grant on any sum under $10,000. But I think it should be a loan on any sum over 10,000. It's just my personal thought on it.
Rick, what do you think about that?
It's pretty funny. I was pretty much at exactly the same place. So, and Chris and I have not been talking about this, but that's pretty much what I would have suggested. So.
Okay.
You got a whole list, Rick. Do you have all that?
I highly doubt it. Okay, so that was one question. The second question was on eligibility. Residents of West Newbury who have lived in town for more than how many years would be eligible?
I would like to say 5 years and 18 years of age or older.
Rick, what do you think?
I think it should be a year. I don't think it should be 5 years. I think it should be I think a year is adequate time. Yeah, the select board in any event will have discretion, and I can't believe somebody is going to move to West Newbury for the sake of borrowing money from the Elliott Fund. So somebody could move back to West Newbury who grew up here and has been gone for 10 years, and then something bad happens and they need help. To me, 5 years is a higher hurdle than we need.
That's fine. I don't want to make hurdles.
So I'll just throw out there that the Affordable Housing Trust has a small grant program that we're rolling out, and we use 3 years. So I don't know if that's a compromise that would be reasonable. Doesn't have to be the same, but there's a precedent there, I guess.
Not a preference. I think, I think a year is the absolute minimum. Defer. Any thoughts, Rick?
I'd prefer to keep it shorter, I'd prefer to see a year. I don't think people are going to be clamoring to get loans from the Elliott Fund and will have come here, for that purpose.
I think you're generally right. I think it's probably going to serve residents who've already been here for a long time. It's probably correct simply because of the price of property, so.
Yeah.
I can defer to that, I have no problem with that.
All right, so keep it at 1 year.
Any age requirement, Rick?
That's probably, the 18 is probably good, because we're asking people to make a commitment. Hopefully they're capable of, hopefully they're legally capable of making decisions for themselves.
Hopefully.
Okay. The next item on administration, there's a whole bunch here that we're currently working on with council in terms of the term of the loan, repayment details, what security will be needed. So I don't know that we're ready to discuss any of that tonight, but those are the kind of things that we're working to firm up. And then the application, this is pretty straightforward. I don't know if either of you had any comments on these questions. It's just meant to have a consistent form for us to look at. I mean, every conversation is going to be different, obviously, but Chris, I see a highlight there. Did you highlight?
What's on the back of the page? No, relative to the form, I think another thing that question should be on there. Are there any other sources of potential revenue, i.e. the housing fund, veterans affair, refinancing, or anything like that? What other options are there? This, in some cases, will be the first course of action, but in others, it maybe should not be.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Is that it for the form?
Yeah, but overall, there's, other things I'd like to see in here. So
Okay.
a little more. One Rick made a statement months ago, and it sticks with me. And it should say in here that all decisions, obviously will be in confidence, does at the bottom, but they all should be made with care and compassion in mind by the select board. And also something in here that say that the select board can modify this based on circumstances too.
Mhm.
And this shouldn't be etched in stone. I think it's got to be flexible.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. We'll have a set of guidelines, but we can't predict everything in life.
And then it would probably come under your administration terms of repayment, but some kind of wording too that would let the people know, maybe it's in here if I read through it again, that the select board has an obligation to protect these funds.
Mhm.
And if you're taking out one of these loans, please have a genuine intent to fulfill that.
Yeah,
Fiduciary responsibility.
I don't use big words like that.
okay. Rick, did you have anything to add?
No, nothing more. Thanks.
I'm just gonna try to add something. Okay,
And my last comment is, once we get this, pulled together a little better, some kind of statement to encourage other people in town who might have money they want to do something with to contribute to the fund for the betterment of the people in Newbury. So I think there should be an encouragement to increase the fund going forward. And to make it very well known that it's available to people who need
yeah,
to use. It's been too quiet for too long.
yeah. So I guess how would that work if this fund was set up by this particular person? We can't just take new funds into it, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's something, as you said, Wendy, some of these things are under review with council, but one of the kind of the holy grail that they've been looking for that we haven't been able to find is any kind of trust document that lays out the board's, fiduciary responsibilities and so forth. So that's something we definitely need to talk about in terms of the ability to receive new funds, because as you know, under Mass General Law, there's a gift account, there's a provision for people giving gifts that are available for specified purposes. And what I was taught many years ago by the Department of Revenue is every dollar that comes into the town goes into the general fund unless there's a statute that says it goes somewhere else. So that's where things like revolving funds or gift accounts or 53G peer review accounts or whatever, water funds, all of that, there has to be a statute and funds that go in and, so here it's not a statute. So it may be the town council would say if someone contributed funds, those would need to be treated in accordance with Mass General Law, which would be the board, accepts the gift, establishes what its purposes are, and then it would be put in as a gift account. So I don't want to be a wet blanket, but we'll definitely look into it. But whether via the Elliott Fund or via a different gift account, there are definitely vehicles for the town to solicit and receive funds for this type of purpose.
Okay. All right, well, I'll make these revisions to the application, and then should we maybe shoot for the second meeting in August? What do you think in terms of timing? I mean, it would be good to email this out and distribute it to the public, but we still have some details to work out, I think.
Yeah, I think that the town council issues, I don't think, I don't know that we have resolution of those
Okay, so
by the 7th. I think we could for the 21st.
that's what I was suggesting.
I think that's good.
Okay, well, let's pencil that in and see how much progress we make. Okay. Next item is select board review of committees, charges and functions. So this is the first of a program of the select board to review all appointed boards and committees, just to see what they've been working on, what their priorities are. The first two we have here are the Personnel Advisory Committee and the Harbor Committee. Angus, do you want to give us a briefing on the personnel?
Sure, and I had hoped to put together a memo. I just didn't have time, but the Personnel Committee is established by a bylaw. It says that the board shall appoint, but then it also says the Personnel Advisory Committee may kind of the board shall appoint to assist in carrying out responsibility. but that the number of members and the periods of service are as the board shall so determine. So it doesn't specify a composition or duration of appointments. So when I began back in 2018, obviously, the Town Manager Act conferred a lot of personnel administration responsibility on my office. With the transition from the select board form of government to the town manager form of government, there were a lot of personnel questions that came up right out of the gate and very frequently. And so I looked in the Personnel Advisory Committee. It did exist on paper, but had only one appointed member, hadn't met for at least 4 years, and there was really virtually no records or meeting minutes on file with the town clerk as to prior activities of the committee. So it was, personnel matters and personnel policy was going to be really central to my ability to assist with the transition to a new form of government. So I reached out to the then chair, Judy Meisner, and really urged that we reactivate the personnel committee. And she made the comment at the time that she was happy to help, but that the language in the bylaw that says that basically the personnel committee will advise the select board. She said, well, they haven't asked, because I asked, why haven't you met this year? She said, well, they haven't asked for my advice. So, okay, well, I would like a sounding board, because there are a lot of personnel policy questions that were coming up at the time that the select board had a very full plate without all of that. And I also just, felt some of these things, it's nice to have a sounding board to vet issues. So anyhow, I did make real efforts in the first 2 to 2.5 years I was here to rebuild the personnel committee. Different members were appointed. A number of them were short-lived for different reasons. And I felt, and actually I would put together meeting packets with a lot of backup and policies, and we'd have these meetings that would sometimes go on for 2 hours or more, and I would look around and realize I'm the only one taking notes. Like there's and some of a lot of the time I was spending was kind of trying to get the committee up to speed on some of what was going on. So in the now 5 years I've been here, in the last 2 years or so, I've said to the board a couple of times, and I think this is correct, or it's not correct or not, it's my opinion, but I think it's a valid opinion, which is that under the town manager form of government as it's defined here in West Newbury, I think the select board really serves as the personnel committee in the way that is intended in this bylaw. Obviously the adoption of policies, but other things like the approval of wages, the Town Manager Act vests that authority with the select board. I propose wages and salaries. The select board can amend that. With hiring, we've resolved some of this with clarifications of policy in the last couple of years, but the Town Manager Act provides town manager appoints subject to confirmation from the board. Same with separation of service. If I were to ever propose a termination, that would be board approval. So the point being, and I put in here the slides that we put together, I put together back in the fall of 2021, which I know you'd each seen before, but this really encapsulates the very close interplay on personnel matters between the town manager and the select board. The town manager is charged with carrying out personnel policies as those policies are defined by the select board. So of necessity, there's a close relationship between my office and the board on personnel policy and administration. And that's really how it's played out both with the current board and prior boards. So just going back about, I think it was it a year ago or 2 years ago, but at some point the board just didn't reappoint because the committee hadn't met at that point in a year and a half. The chair wasn't clear on the composition of the committee, even though there was no reason, in my opinion, why the chair wouldn't know that. It was on the committee webpage, it had been communicated, but the chair hadn't convened a meeting. A lot of it was kind of falling on me to build this committee up and provide a lot of background information, go to meetings, put in a fair amount of time and really not have anything to show for it, because at the end of the day, not only were they not even taking minutes, but I was, that where, it really comes down to the select board, a lot of these questions on personnel policy or implementation. And anytime I've had questions where I found the policy to be gray, or in some instances, we had things that, some staff would read one way and maybe my office would read a different way. In every single instance that that's happened, I've brought it to the board, sometimes informally looking for guidance, or like a few weeks ago with the jury duty, 5 days instead of 3 days, looking for the board's approval to waive, because I don't have the authority to waive any personnel policy. But also we've been much more proactive in the last couple of years on amendments to the personnel policy. So for instance, the accrual rate for qualified part-time employees was something that had been a nagging issue for many years before I got here, and working with the board about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, we brought forward an amendment to clarify that it with everyone agreed, and we fixed it, and we made it better. So I think that kind of rhetorically, I continue to think that in practice, the select board operates as the personnel advisory committee. In the town I used to work in, they did have a personnel committee, and that committee was established with the sole purpose of hearing grievances in the event that they got past the point where, the grievances filed with the department head. If the employee is not satisfied, they file a grievance with the town manager. If they're not satisfied, up in my last job, they would then go to the personnel committee. In this town, that would go to the select board. And I do think that's a theoretical situation, wouldn't be expected to come up very often, but I do think that creates a little bit of an issue where the select board has significant authority under the Town Manager Act for both hiring and termination. The fact it's also kind of the grievance entity, I think is something we ought to look at. I would feel very comfortable if there was a separate body that was completely, kind of not in the mix in the day-to-day that would hear grievances, because I think there's some activity there. At the same time, it's such a rare occurrence. I don't know if it's, how important it is to potentially set up a whole separate body just for that very purpose that may, years may go by and it may never even have occasion to meet. So, but I do think that the personnel policy as defined in this bylaw, which was approved in 1999 and has not been amended since that time, is really, it's not actually worked this way. I can't find whether it ever worked this way, but I think things like if for instance, compensation and, different employee wages, if that, all of a sudden went to a personnel committee, it would just, in my opinion, represent a complete duplication of effort and really not add any value, because there's such a good, process where the board is kind of very hands-on with those questions already. And is also, has the benefit of seeing how the organization operates,
It would take a lot of getting up to speed for
It is
volunteers.
an enormous learning curve, and all the work that was done over the last year and a half on the wage classification study, updating all the job descriptions in a very hands-on way, literally going through 45 job descriptions with red line track changes, very hands-on. So I think there's a really good dynamic between the town manager's office and the select board. I will say it's different than a real town manager form of government. I think the board is more hands-on than what I have seen in other towns with this form of government, but I think it works. And, especially in the last few years, I think it's worked well with some of the progress that's been made to clear up some of the ambiguity of the personnel policies. There's definitely more work to be done there. And that's one thing that back in 2018 to 2020 or so, when I was really making efforts with the personnel committee, I was hoping that would become like a work group to actually advance some of these potential amendments to the policy. And that just, not only did that not happen, it just became clear that any work that wasn't done by me, or, there's no HR staff, wasn't gonna get done.
Mhm.
So it just, I look back at that time and said, geez, I've been to how many meetings, spent how many hours preparing. All of which I really felt that I had nothing whatsoever to show for it. So I think the bylaw really needs to be looked at. I think that everything I'm saying, I've been kind of saying for a couple of years, it hasn't been the right time to propose either repealing or revising the bylaw, but I do think as we look to next spring, I definitely see this as a housekeeping issue because it just, there's the operations as they've operated since many, many years before I got here really don't reflect what's set out in the bylaw.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to reflect the town manager government.
No, not in any way. Yeah.
So, I mean, what are what's the procedure and we would just repeal the bylaw?
Well, I think the reason I bring up the example up north about the personnel committee in that town operating as a grievance hearing board. That was something that while it was rare and it didn't happen to come up in the years I was there, that committee did exist. They were routinely reappointed. They knew they existed. They knew that if called upon, they would serve. That's one example. I'm sure there's others, I don't know, Jim may have, things he's seen in towns he's worked in, but I think rather than going right to repeal, I think it would be worth looking at what, is there a role that a personnel advisory committee could serve in the town of West Newbury that would actually add value? And if there is, then let's look to amend. But I think continuing to have a bylaw on the books, for years when it's not in fact kind of functioning the way it was written 24 years ago, I think it would be good to clean that up. I mean, there's aspects, I wouldn't just repeal it because there's aspects of this that I think, have continued to work and be good. I mean, for instance, the amendments to the personnel policies and the 10-day comment period, that's actually here in the bylaw. So maybe if that was repealed, it could be first put into the policy. So you're not actually changing policy, you're just changing where it's written. That's another thing that I think is odd about this bylaw, even though we have it posted to the town website in the place with all the other bylaws and policies. So it's right there. It would be easy for anyone to find. It's kind of odd to me that it's a standalone bylaw. It's not actually part of the town bylaws. I don't know why it was done that way. And it's not in the personnel policy. So someone can read our personnel policy and read our town bylaws and just overlook this because it's just the way it's. I don't know. I never looked back to that 1999 town meeting minutes. I don't know if it was intended as a standalone bylaw or if whomever was the town clerk back then just never put it into the town bylaws and
There it stands.
there it stands, but it's always been odd to me. There's other bylaws, the town bylaws, and this 2.5-page personnel bylaw that's like would be easy for someone to overlook, and that's certainly not helpful.
So then the plan would be, I mean, right now nobody's been appointed anyway. To the
Correct,
committee.
yeah.
So, so the plan would be to move ahead to Springtown meeting and look at revising or.
I think that would be really good, and I think the initial question would be what purpose could it serve?
Yeah.
And maybe there isn't one, and maybe there is.
Okay. Chris, Rick, do you have any input on this?
I think Springtown meeting sounds like a fine time to figure out what to do. I mean, we have time between now and then and yeah, I don't think we should try to fill it now, obviously.
No.
Yeah.
When the list of all the committees came out a few weeks ago, I think the comment was, somebody pointed and said, that's one committee that we could do without. I thought that's where this conversation is gonna go. So my comment would be, Angus can look through that policy and anything that you feel is of value that it can go somewhere else before you get rid of it.
Yeah.
Other than that, you don't need committees that aren't doing anything.
Right.
And
For sure.
don't ever meet.
Okay.
And then also if the task can be done or being done in other places, it's kind of foolish.
All right, so we'll look ahead to Springtown meeting to get that cleaned up. The second committee is the Harbor Committee. Just looking at the bylaw on that, I just want to read the purpose of the committee, because there's a lot of stuff in here that's really about the harbor master, not necessarily the committee. So the harbor committee says the board of selectmen shall appoint 3 town residents to serve. The committee is advisory and shall report to the board of selectmen from time to time to make recommendations on any and all matters related to marine activity, afloat or ashore. So that's a pretty broad mission statement. In practice, Angus, how often do they meet?
So when I started, they hadn't met for about a year and a half. In my first summer, got some resident correspondence with concern about the speed of boats, about the lack of enforcement presence on the river, about potentially setting up a no wake zone, as well as about noise in some of the boats that were just gunning their engines. And so I started looking into it. The town at that time, and so I reached out to the chair, Brad Dorr, and urged them to meet. They did have a couple of meetings my first year. One of the things that came out of really my looking at this on the select board at the time was we completely agreed that there was a total lack of any kind of enforcement presence. So my first year, we worked with the town of Salisbury, where we have the intermunicipal agreement for harbor master services prior to fiscal year 2019. Well, prior to actually 20, because I started in 19. That the scope of that agreement was solely to do with pump out services, and there's restrictions against using a pump out boat for enforcement. So while they were coming up the river with a pump out boat, they by law could not do enforcement in that boat, nor was that within their scope of contract. So we worked with the town of Salisbury and with the harbor master, and we did broaden the scope of that municipal agreement. So starting in fiscal year 20, for the first time, and I guess since the former harbor master left, I don't know, 15 years ago, but for the first time in a long time, the town actually had an enforcement presence. It's a limited presence. It calls on the harbor master to send their patrol boats up and down during the boating season from basically May to October, and that's all defined in the intermunicipal agreement. We increased the amount that we pay them by a fairly modest amount. It wasn't a big cost driver. And so there's been at least some visibility and some presence for enforcement. And we heard from some of those residents who had initially reached out that they were very pleased. They definitely noticed the difference. As far as the harbor committee, they've had probably in the 5 years I've been here, they've probably had a total of 8 or 9 meetings. I'd say at least 2 or 3 of those were regarding their initiative to study potential mooring field. In fact, this must have been 3 or 4 years ago. They engaged a firm to do a feasibility study of the potential mooring field that was paid out of the Waterways Fund, which is under their oversight. And that never really went anywhere. It was presented to the board. The board at that time thought it was an interesting idea, but had a lot of questions, and then it just kind of floated away. But that study's still in the books. That's the only kind of tangible accomplishment I can think of, and it was something that was really done rather than coming to the board ahead of time to say, hey, this is the idea. Do you think we should do this? It was actually coming to the board after it was already done. So as you know, there was a time really just last year where I think it was last June of 2022, the committee hadn't met for a year. The select board invited the chair in to basically emphasize that we have a committee, it really needs to meet and have a function. And there are some active questions that I know the Concom has with regard to our process for issuing mooring permits, and whether the harbor committee should be more engaged in that. There's been a fair amount of correspondence on that, but that's never really been taken up by the committee. And in the year that I've really been prepping that, they haven't held a meeting. So, I've met with Brad a couple of times or talked to him one-on-one, just said, hey, can you have a meeting? It'd be really good to get a meeting, and there's just never a meeting, and it's up to the chair to call a meeting. So I do think there's some outstanding questions that I have and others on staff have, both regarding the harbor committee as well as who's on paper as the assistant harbor master, because that all goes back to before I started. And we've got this somewhat odd situation where we have a harbor master in name with the town of Salisbury, and they do have some of the traditional harbor master responsibilities, but some other things like signing off on mooring permits, that's completely not their scope, and nor I think would we want that. We would want someone local involved.
But that's what's in the bylaw.
Well,
Harbor master.
Yeah, I've had that conversation, and Brad, including in an email he sent, I don't know, probably 6 or 8 months ago, described the committee as the emperor with no clothes. He doesn't feel that they really have any jurisdiction at the end of the day. I think others read it differently, but I think it's fair to say that if this is written, that they be, making recommendations or taking guidance from the select board, that relationship really hasn't existed any other than the couple of meetings they had regarding the mooring field study. I think it's very fair to say that the majority of meetings they've held since in the 5 years I've been here have been at my specific urging, and in most cases I've prepared the agenda. I mean, it's kind of not dissimilar from personality. If I didn't push it, it wouldn't happen. And sometimes even when I did, long periods of time would go by and no meetings would be held. So I think if there's things that this board would like to see from that committee or that function of town government, I definitely think it would be appropriate to invite either the chair or the full committee in to make clear to them what your expectations are. Because anytime I've tried to push anything, I'm told, well, we're the emperor with no clothes. The bylaw doesn't give us any standing on this. And I'm hearing different opinions from different people. Since they're appointed by the board, I think the board.
Yeah, so I did invite the chair. I mean, I sent a copy of the committee form and questionnaire that we mailed out to everybody, and he didn't respond, so.
One other thing I'd like to add, which I should have mentioned earlier, so one thing that we did that was a little bit out of bounds, but it was in the public interest, so I think we felt fine about it, but back when this whole issue of enforcement was coming up, and some residents' interest in greater visibility on the river, we knew there were. So Steve Boyd was one of the residents who was really vocal about that, and so when we got to the end of my first year, we knew that the harbor committee, as then composed, which is the same composition as it has now and had for a long time, really wasn't that keen on the idea of enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And so the select board in the spring of 2019, at my recommendation, appointed 2 associate members. There's nothing in the bylaw that talks about associate members. They really have no standing, but this committee isn't taking any votes anyway. So the spirit of that was to give more people a seat at the table that had historically, rightly or wrongly, felt that they kind of were out of the loop on things. And really before the last few years and all the improvements we've made on posting agendas and the website, I mean, now I think we've bent over backwards to make things as transparent as possible. In the old days, that wasn't the case, whether that was because of capacity. I think that was more capacity than intent, but I think it was fair that some residents felt kind of out of the loop on certain things. So Steve Boyd and actually Brian Richard expressed interest, so they were both appointed as associate members. They don't have any standing, but the idea was at least they'd be copied on agendas, could come to meetings and would have a seat at the table. So
If they had a meeting.
if they had meetings, but I could point to you to agendas that were sent out that were not copied to them, which I then copied to them. So again, it's like, it's just, I don't know if that's just an oversight or if that's like resistance to the idea of new ideas.
Wendy sent the the form to be filled out, invite them to the meeting, and either one.
I just sent it to the chair, yeah. So in other towns, how do they manage this? It just seems like having a harbor committee, these are like operational requirements of the town, issuing warrant permits and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
It seems like it should be a town staff function or that.
Yeah, well, and it used to be, you know, I think it goes back to the early 2010s. I think there was maybe a former fire staff person who retired, and maybe at that point the boat had, because the boat's listed in our insurance schedule under public safety, and historically, I know it was housed there.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that would be a really logical place for issuance of mooring permits and,
That's all that committee effectively does, that's it.
well, they don't do that. They don't
I
do
mean,
that.
that's their only function, that if they did.
No, they have no function.
Well,
So,
providing guidance, that's all it says.
that's all, there's no function here, they're purely advisory.
So I think we're gonna.
Yeah, I have talked to Chief Dwyer about that at some point in the future. I would like to see that actually housed, that function housed in public safety. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I remember in my first week on the job when one of my staff kind of said, "Oh, hey, by the way, did anyone tell you you're harbor master too?" And I was, "Are you kidding?" But it was in jest, but it really wasn't, because that's where all the permits were submitted to me.
Yeah.
And thankfully, in the time since, we've broadened that, so there's more staff involved, so it's not, you know, I'm not the pinch point on that, but we've still been on the learning curve on things like that, you know, we let Michelle know, but some of these are exactly Concom, but that doesn't mean you don't want your agent looking at it, or, you know, Michelle and I actually met with Willem Van de Stad, the Salisbury Harbor Master, about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, and he was talking about the process they follow at Salisbury. Anytime there's a mooring permit application, he goes out with his boat, he looks, he makes sure it's not in sturgeon habitat or disrupting seagrasses, or, you know, there's a qualitative on-site review.
Mhm.
We don't have a staff person with a boat.
Was there any ever discussion that he might provide those services to West Newbury as well?
I think he'd be amenable to that, you know, I'm sure his town manager would look for a fee offset,
Oh,
you
that's
know.
fine. I mean,
Like, yeah, I
The
think,
fee with them.
yeah, right now, I do think it's something that there's a bit of a gap.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Yeah,
So currently our pump out boat is down there, right? So it's in Salisbury, correct? So we don't, so although we have access to a boat, we don't really have access to a boat even for performing those services, not enforcement, but even for looking at a mooring location.
correct.
Yeah.
Now, Tom Goodwin, I met with Tom Goodwin, you know, on paper, the assistant harbor master. He actually just by coincidence stopped in about a week and a half ago to pay a bill, and I heard him, oh, hey, Tom, he stopped in, we sat for 15 or 20 minutes, and I, you know, talked to him about the kind of nebulousness of the function he plays, and that, for one thing, that, you know, the bylaw spells out that we ought to have a map showing all of the mooring locations, and he mentioned, oh, he'd be happy to go out in his boat and put together a map, and I hope he will, and I would like to see that happen. But that's an example of something that's not new in the bylaw, that's been in the bylaw for a long time, and a resident, you know, could come in and have, you know, there have been, not frequently, but there have been questions about, you know, hey, where's the map of all the mooring permits? Well, we're gonna have one.
If I may, whatever functions the town needs to do, it clearly doesn't reside with the harbor committee. Nothing resides with the harbor.
Right, in terms of
Yeah,
this
whatever you have
bottom.
to do, I don't know why we even talk about the harbor committee. You should be talking about the thing you have to do.
Well, the board's doing.
I can't really hear what Rob is saying, so sorry, but I couldn't understand you, Rob, sorry. Could you?
All I was saying was that from what is called for under the section harbor committee is nothing more than they exist. And from time to time, they advise you. All the other stuff that's related, that Angus has been going over in great detail, and there's others beyond that, licensing, mooring, all that stuff. It doesn't reside with them. we should be talking about it differently, that's all I'm saying. I wouldn't focus on our committee.
Well, it is on the book, so if we're gonna get rid of it.
Yeah.
So part of kind of housekeeping, they're kind of looking through
Yeah,
everything.
no, I know exactly what, but I'm more concerned about the
The
other
other
things
stuff.
that aren't getting
Yeah.
done,
Right,
as opposed to the non-existence of the non-committee.
it's not a double negative.
Yeah, that is, well, yeah, I think that's what we got here, the double negative.
All right,
Thank you,
so,
okay?
so let's see. So perhaps this is another bylaw for amendment at the annual town meeting.
Yeah,
The thing is, each one of these is gonna take a fair amount of work to, you know,
Yep.
flesh out and modify. But I am concerned that the functions of the harbor master right now are not being, performed. It's probably too late to modify the contract with Salisbury at this point, right? I mean, we're getting towards the end of the summer and.
yeah, I think, yeah.
And how long is the contract? Is it an annual or?
I
Seemed like
can't
we
remember,
just-
we just did it and I thought it was for a 2-year term. But I know I mean, Willem is very accessible. He'd be happy to come to a board meeting. He'd be happy to go to a harbor committee meeting, if there was one. You know, I think that the guiding question, similar to the personnel committee, is what function could it serve that would be helpful, and then to go in that direction rather than adhering to a bylaw that's really, you know, out of date.
Yeah. And so maybe along those lines is itemizing from this bylaw what functions the harbor master serves and, you know, currently who on staff is doing them. And, you know, could we pay an incremental amount to the Salisbury harbor master to perform these parts?
That's a needed function to someone actually
Yeah.
performing.
Yeah, I mean, right now, we're administering all the paperwork aspects, but we have no boots on the ground at all, so.
Okay,
Boots on the ground or boats in the water?
so far, we're just creating more work for ourselves.
But this is work that's been kind of on the list for
Yeah.
5 years. It's good that it's getting the board's attention, because it's only gonna get done if you all prioritize it, because
Right.
because that allows me to justify the time me or other staff spend on something as if we're doing meet, you know, your objective sets. Rather than like a side, some of this stuff I feel like I tried to do as kind of my own initiative, but you all keep me pretty busy with the workload you send, so. I think it's important to become part of your work plan.
Sure. Okay. Anything else on that? Chris, Rick, we good?
No. Yep.
Okay. All right, the next item is to set the warrant closing date for special town meeting. So it's typically 4 weeks before. What's the general?
No, it would be much more before that, because yeah,
Sorry.
it's gotta be-
The warrant closes usually 4 weeks before, right?
no, before town meeting?
Yeah.
No, way before that, because there's gotta be time for the FinCom process to play out,
Mhm.
and then the booklet. So with the town meeting on the 23rd, that brings the booklet back to what would be the 9th, but that's Indigenous Peoples' Day, so it's actually the 6th, October 6th. So if their booklet needs to be done by then, I was looking at the calendar earlier, I think Tuesday, September 5th is the latest that you would close it, and I think that is workable. I'm glad Rob is here, he can share his perspective as FinCom chair. But I would absolutely not go any later than that, and if you want, actually, for the 5th, you'd want to set a date for submittal of proposed articles by either the 31st or the 1st, so that they can be in your packet for the meeting on the 5th. And then you would vote that night to close the warrant, set the table, and then FinCom would need to spring into action pretty quickly with its meeting schedule in September. But based on prior years, that would be a very workable timeline.
Mhm. Rob, what do you think about that?
Sounds like fun. No, I mean, Angus has a good handle on this.
Yeah.
We're gonna take Angus' lead on it,
Okay,
for sure.
I mean, Rob's definitely gonna want to program meeting dates with the FinCom, just as like a save the date, even before they know what the actual content's going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the closing date gonna be?
I would recommend Thursday, August 31st, but just so you know, Chris, and I think you do know, until the board actually votes to close the warrant is open. So even if we set a date of the 31st, if someone comes in the day of the meeting and says, hey, I want this in the warrant, it's fully within the board's discretion to include it. Once you vote to close it, that's when you can't add in new without voting to reopen it.
So we wouldn't vote to close it until September 5th.
No, because you have to actually convene to close it. You can't vote a future
So
date.
you're giving people a deadline of the 31st.
Right, no,
Technically, they're.
yeah, if they came in as late as the night of the meeting, and certainly if a citizen petition article came in the night of the meeting, if that's, found to have the appropriate number of signatures, that's gonna be.
Yeah.
It's a whole other legal work that I just found out about, because I have 10 days to legally certify signatures. Another time, I had a whole problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so,
But I think if we sent around notice to the boards, committees, commissions, the department heads, as well as public posting on the town website, news and announcements of October 31st.
August.
August 31st.
August 31st. And then knowing that if something trickles in a couple of days after that, until you actually vote to close on the 5th, it's still open.
okay. Someone will make a motion? We need a motion on that, right?
Yeah, I make a motion that the last day to submit articles for inclusion on town meeting warrant will be August 31st. End of business, August 31st.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So what is it that happens just prior to the town meeting? There's another deadline, 2 weeks or 3 weeks before?
Yeah, so the FinCom booklet is, so the warrant has to be posted 14 days ahead.
Okay, that's what it was.
And traditionally, people have considered the FinCom booklet as the warrant. And so that's always been issued 14 days ahead. The actual FinCom bylaw says their recommendations are due 5 days ahead.
Yeah, right, now you
but-
can't go, forget that part.
Maybe that's in the bylaw, but in
That
practice.
was September, that was 1930.
Right, in practice, it's always been 14 days is the FinCom booklet. So if that's Friday, October 6th, that means it's gotta be, I think that's a tight window, but it's comfortable. It's very achievable. Yeah.
Tell me how many warrant articles, and I'll tell you
Oh, that- yeah.
how tight it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I agree with you. I mean, it's similar to what we did last year.
Yeah,
Last year was not a simple warrant for the fall.
no,
There was more activity, I think, than other years, so, yeah, we can do it.
yeah,
We'll do it.
all right. Great. All right, town manager updates.
okay. All right, so I've included a number of active issues. The first one, the Tate and Howard Water Hydraulic Plan, Capital Plan and Rate Study, as well as the Weston Sampson Engineering Study at 31 Dole Place. I didn't have any new written information for the packet. Let me start with Weston Sampson. So as you know from the board's last discussion, we had our kickoff meeting with them, including myself and Mark Marlowe, then went walk the site. With the landowners rep, I see Mark here tonight. So I think it was a good kickoff meeting. We gave them a lot of background documents before they even bid on the job. And as I said to you at the last meeting, they seem to have a really good understanding of the project and our objectives. So they did send us a number of requests for additional documents. And we, either Mark or I, have provided all but one. There is one document that Mark is still trying to find. It's actually the permit application that went to DEP in 2016. So far, he hasn't been able to find that. At the end of the day, we can get it. We will get it, but I know that's really important to get that to Weston and Sampson ASAP. They sent us another follow-up email today, because, you know, they're on a very tight timeline.
And that's
So-
not available online in the DEP
No,
website?
no, the approval that they've been provided, but the actual application,
Okay.
Weston and Sampson says it's gonna have a lot more detail, than anything that, Mark's been able to find, and as you know, this back in that time, and really no different today, all of that's housed in the water department. There's none of that in the select board or town manager files. But basically, I think it's off to a good start. I think it's very, very, you know, smart move that the town went this direction. And, I think when we get their report, it will either, you know, modify our understanding of the estimated costs or maybe validate, what was previously estimated as cost, development site. The other, reference to the Tate and Howard hydraulic plan, capital plan, and rate study. Wendy, when you and I met last week to review the draft agenda, you know, I hope there'd be something tangible to report tonight, and that's part of why I put it on the agenda, is to kind of create some urgency. And also the Water Commission met this past Thursday morning and had this as a topic on their agenda. We still have not received, you know, a commitment in terms of what date we're going to receive a draft rate study. We did receive the draft hydraulic plan back in March. We scanned that in and sent that around to the board at the time. Marlo tells me he's, you know, his board has long since provided any comments they had on the hydraulic plan. He doesn't expect that to change much from the draft that was sent around in March. The capital plan is, you know, that's just basically updating the numbers. It's not different projects from the main replacements that have been in the capital plan, but it's updated numbers. But we're really needing to see that, and the rate study as well. We really need to see that because it's really a foundation for the work that we've made a commitment to do with a water financial plan looking ahead 15 years. This study that was, you know, the contract was signed, I think, in May of 2022, was always seen as the foundational data for the financial study of the water department. So
And when on that contract, when were this?
it was 180 days for performance.
So isn't this breach of contract?
It is, yeah.
I mean, at some point, somebody has to.
Well, so the signatory of the contract is the Water Commission. And so I did not go to their meeting on Thursday. I was down in Sandwich. It was actually scheduled for Wednesday, and then they postponed it on short notice and pushed it to Thursday. So not having been in the room, I don't know what the dynamic is and whether the Water Commission is equally frustrated at the delay. You know, I've certainly conveyed to Mark many times, and I believe he is doing what he can to push them. But I don't know if the Water Commission has picked up the phone and said, you know, I mean, what I said to Mark, I said, it is increasingly difficult for me to explain publicly why we don't have a draft rate study when this contract is already 6 months overdue, and we don't even have a draft. It's
So
very
if this was
frustrating.
the contract that you had signed or the select board had signed, how would you?
Well, it wouldn't have gone this far. We would have, you know, similar, I mean, you see with the Weston Sampson, we signed that and within a matter of 2 weeks, we had a kickoff meeting and, you know, all the follow-up documents that we're sending them as timely as we can. There is this one outstanding, but, you know, project management, you gotta keep on it, make sure everyone's aware of the timeline, make sure the timelines are crystal clear in the contract, and they are in that contract. It says 180 days. But when we wrote the Weston Sampson contract and the RFQ that we put out, we put in specific dates and bold-faced text. I don't know that helps, but we made sure everybody was really clear that there were absolute dates. Same with a paid school study that had absolute dates, and they were in. You know, that team was there today. They spent all day in paid school touring around, and they're underway. They're doing the work. So it's project management, and I think that I do think that the transition in the superintendent obviously had a role. needless to say, the untimely passing of the sub-consultant who was on tap to do the water rate study obviously was an enormous setback and can't really be overstated. But at the same time, I believe he passed away about 4 months after the contract was signed, so.
But still, Tina and Howard could say, we don't have the staff to do this right now,
Yeah,
subcontract it up to somebody else.
they
you know?
could.
I think that's what needs to happen,
Mhm.
if they can't do it,
Mhm.
but I don't know, as a board, what role we have. You know, if the Board of Water Commission is the signatory to this contract.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's any, we don't have we're not empowered to tell them that they have to do something different.
Could we
Almost,
how critical this is, that we get this moving forward?
Mhm.
well, we can certainly tell them that, and I'd like to think that as other people are aware of it, that they would communicate with the Board of Water Commission. I mean, we should, the select board needs to, but their customers. Perhaps some people will hear it tonight, what's going on, and we'll reach out.
That's 180 days, are they?
6 months or 7.
180 days past 180 days.
Yeah, no, it was signed back in May of 2022, so it's due by the end of the calendar year.
And we exerted pressure on the Water Commissioners at town meeting, gave them instructions, to participate in a water financial plan, and we can't do that until we have this rate study.
Right.
That
So
was
it
my
makes
next
sense.
question, was the status of that, so this is-
Yeah.
And the rate study even goes a little bit further than that.
Right.
Because my understanding is the rate study would be one way that they can get increased revenue for the coming year.
Mhm.
And that hasn't become an issue, but it'll be an issue within months, days. So
A small number of months.
Yeah, so-
No, that's an abs, and that point has been made very clear to the Water Commission in writing multiple times. Is that by the time we go to set the tax rate in late November, they have to either show that they've increased rates, or they need to go to fall town meeting and reduce their approved operating budget, or go to fall town meeting and authorize a transfer of retained earnings to balance their budget. Because the budget that was approved, Department of Revenue is not going to sign off on, because we are not within, unless we can show them that the Water Commission changed rates, they're not going to accept that
They
budget.
won't accept it, right?
That's exactly what happened last fall.
So what was the contract value on that?
About 80, I want to say it was 87,000.
Pay any?
Not for the.
Oh, no, the rate study was like 17,000 of that.
Have they been paid any of it?
No, not for the rate study, no.
I think somebody's gonna ask the water department to terminate the contract and move on, because obviously if the fellow's passed, Tina and Howard doesn't have the ability or the desire wanted to complete it, so it's not happening. And I don't look for the 17.5, just find someone else.
All right. So I'll draft the memo to be reviewed at our next meeting. Is that?
My guess is the board would vote to authorize you to send something on their behalf based on the Senate.
I don't think it should be waived.
Yeah, no,
I'm just of the essence on this is.
All right.
I really thought with the Water Commission meeting last week and with this on tonight's agenda, that we would have, I had hoped that we'd have something, even a date, even just, and I told Mark, just tell us when we'll get a draft. And I talked to him again today, and they haven't provided him that.
All right.
Is this should be directed to the water board. Though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're correct, yeah. No, Mark,
Yeah, this
Mark's
is not
doing everything
everything we can.
no, he's doing everything he can.
No, we should be clear on that. It's not an
Yeah.
issue with the superintendent.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I would be good, Wendy, if you, I would be fine with you drafting the letter and it going out before our next meeting. if that's
Okay.
possible.
Yep.
If that's
I'll do that.
possible.
Okay. Mark, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I wanted to see the type of progress you folks were making, but we're 8 years deep and it doesn't seem like a lot.
Yeah.
So, no, I've got nothing further to say.
Okay,
Well, I think the Weston Sampson's right on track
yeah,
with the schedule that's in the, it's, you know, it doesn't happen overnight,
You
but.
know, I drafted a letter to the select board, I chose not to send it. There was a lot of information that was in the Newburyport News article that was misinformation. And all of the people sitting here, none of you were here since the beginning. So you're probably working off of notes and conversations. But it said that the town had been negotiating with the landowners in good faith and consistently for 8 years. None of that is true. None of it is true. And the public needs to know what's going on there. And as a taxpayer, I realize I'm close to this, but as a taxpayer, there were years that went on with no communication from the town to the landowner or myself. And so when somebody is a resident of the town and they pick up the newspaper and they read that, it's misleading. And I don't know whether I'll speak, if we're given a chance to speak about any articles, if there are going to be any at the town meeting in the fall, but if I do, I'll prepare a short, brief statement, basically giving the landowners take on this. It is unfortunate that nobody sitting here was here for the last 8 years, but it's what it is.
mhm,
So, but there was a lot of misleading information there. And it's incorrect, and it's, you know, unfortunately, it's out in the public, and it's whatever. So that's my take on it.
What was the incorrect information? My question.
Sure, well, how much time do you want to talk about it?
It wasn't a long story, so.
Well, no, it's 8 years, but,
Rick, are you able to hear Rick?
I can, yes.
Okay, good, all right.
so, Chris, it said that the town had been negotiating consistently with the landowners for 8 years. That's not true.
Whoever got not consistent, you mean it's been an 8-year duration?
yeah,
right?
it didn't say consistently, it just said it's been an 8-year.
So Chris, in 8 years, if you spoke with the landowner twice, is that consistent negotiations? I'm curious. What do you think?
Well, you say spoke, there's also
So-
communications too, weren't there communications then?
Probably 4 or 5 in 8 years. 4 or 5 in 8 years.
Yeah,
What do
I
you think?
just,
That's
yeah,
just
I,
not true.
yeah, so.
That's not true. In the
Angus.
5 years I've been here, never mind the 3 years.
Yeah,
That's
so I
definitely
want
not
to
true.
point out that. the
That
town
is
has no
absolutely not true.
Control over a newspaper article.
I understand, I know, I do understand that.
Yeah.
But Angus, I respectfully disagree with you.
I understand. I don't think you would
Were
say.
you
it if
here
you
in
didn't.
2015?
No, I was not.
Or were you here in 2016?
No,
17?
no,
18?
mid-18.
Okay, all right, so you missed the first 3.5 years. When Mike McCarron was here, and my wife and I were on vacation in Florida, and I got an email saying the town, and I'm in the real estate business. Basically making an offer to the landowner for $1 million in pro tanto. Okay, that's not a binding offer. And so we just sent it back and I said, this is not binding, it's not a consideration. And then quite a long period of time went by. And then we had a couple of other communications. It's just, had this been addressed a lot earlier, the town could have borrowed money at half what they're gonna have to borrow. And the value and the cost to the taxpayers would have been substantially less. We are no farther along on this, but not a lot farther along on this than we were. When did we do the testing? 2016, 17? The 16.
The
right?
unit test, yeah.
So I have never seen any, I mean, my grandchildren will be born then, and they're not even alive yet.
before anything gets done here. And what will the cost to the townspeople be at that point?
Well, all costs are going up, we know that, but my question is, the town has made you a second offer at some point, again, I wasn't on the board there,
That's correct.
and you haven't counted.
That's absolutely correct.
Are you interested in letting the town know what you want for the land so there can be a negotiation?
Not with an offer at that, not with an offer.
You've
at
got a
that
number, and the town is.
Yeah, so, yeah, Mark, I mean, I've been here, I've been at it for 4.5 years now, and the town's made 2 offers. Each time
The town made one offer.
and you've declined to counter. We can't
Wait, so-
negotiate without a partner in the negotiation who will communicate. And if all you communicate is no, we get nowhere.
Respectfully, I have 41 years of real estate negotiation and experience.
Mark, I don't care if you have a million years in it, okay? You got to communicate with us. You need to give us more information.
If I ask you,
just keep feeding you numbers.
so feed us a real number, Rick. And the other thing is, when we had our meeting on Zoom, okay, and you told us you would provide us, you'd like to provide us with a copy of the appraisal, you provide us with a number. How valid is an appraisal? And you say you're operating in good faith. How valid is an appraisal when you don't show the comps? Rick?
Yeah, so we told you we would talk to the appraiser and we were not at liberty to release the appraisal to you.
So
Yeah, so we said we'd go back and talk to them. That's the answer we got. So,
Chris,
you know what, Mark, I didn't envision this was gonna be
and that's fine, that's fine.
I just
But
want,
I want to respond to Chris before we leave.
sure.
You will get a response of no until an offer is a legitimate offer on the property. So to the board, and to the town, you will not get a response until you give us a real offer, okay? A house in my neighborhood sold for $2.2 million last week, okay? This is a water source that can provide the town and also has the ability to possibly sell to other towns. The town's been looking for water since what, the 30s or 40s? I think Paul James will tell you this. To think that that land is worth $2 million, I respectfully disagree. And so the answer will be no until a real offer comes forward that is worth countering and not until. And you're right, so I'm done.
So you're aware both appraisals we had done said the highest and best use is residential. That's what these offers are based on. And so you can disagree, but that's what our paid professionals are telling us.
I do. The paid professionals are telling you it's a water source. And so if you were in Texas and you had an acre of land and it produced 10,000 gallons of oil a day, does that mean it's a building lot? You're wrong. And I disagree with the
The
appraisers.
zoning would not allow anybody else but the town to put a water source there. So you can't sell it as a water source.
Have you done an appraisal on it?
Absolutely not. Absolutely. We will not do an appraisal of this. You've shown no good faith in dealing with us for 8 years. We are not going to spend the money to do an appraisal at this time. So you do what you want to do, but until you come up with a number that is actually real, I see us, this is going to just keep kicking down the road.
Okay.
Thank you for your.
Angus, a municipality, once you have an appraisal, you can't spend, I think it's 10% above that.
It depends. Under CPA, you're limited to the appraised value, but if you're using other sources, you're not. You could spend
Well, I know
about,
with the schools, we try purchasing the house up front, and it had to be within a certain percentage of the appraisal.
you have to do a public notice if you're paying above the appraised value. That's got to go to the central register. It's got to be a broadly advertised notice of why.
So I don't know how much you guys want to discuss this right now. It seems like.
We've had a lot of, as he said, the article on the paper he doesn't agree with. We've got the gentleman here, so I thought to ask a couple of reasonable questions, Mike.
Which you have.
Yeah.
And you got reasonable answers, and I wouldn't do a deep dive into anything.
But you're going to be coming to do further testing on it, and we'll have another discussion about this.
Exactly.
But at a point, the town has been buying water from Newbury Port Angus for how many years? 50, 60, 70 years? We watch what the town of West Newbury pays for the rates, and they're going up and up and up. And they're gonna have their own problem up in Newbury, but believe me, we've done our homework on this. We're not coming here not having done the homework. And so when our water rates become more egregious, then we'll have another conversation. And at what point will the town start to negotiate in good faith? It isn't now, not based on the offers we've received. So if you think those are building lots, that's your opinion.
Well, that's what our appraisers are telling
Right.
us.
Yeah, well then that's fine.
Yeah.
And maybe we build a couple of houses on
Okay.
it. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, so I will draft the memo. I'm gonna run it by you, I guess. I'm sure we can get it done this week. Okay. Next item, Ash Street updates. So if I can just preface this, this is not an agenda because we're not gonna have a big discussion, but I did want Angus to update you and Rick on what's been going on. Rick, you had asked to wait until you're back next meeting to discuss this, so that's the plan, but there has been work ongoing, so,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of brief updates. Our conservation agent, Michelle's been doing terrific work. Looking into background and Jim and Rebecca and Max have been scouring the basement files to look for kind of all the background and there's a lot of it, but it's interesting that it kind of falls off a cliff around 2010. And we're not finding a lot of documentation after that, but we've definitely been able to kind of recreate some of the correspondence that was going on back then in the context of the then proposal to pave it, which was then denied, which was then not appealed, and so that's not anything in it, just to be clear. But basically what we're trying to level set with the regulatory agencies of the state. We had a really good initial discussion with the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. Myself and Michelle and Wendy was part of that. And there were a couple of great follow-up steps to that. They made clear that their interest in this street is to do with the estimated habitat for the Blandings turtle. So it was agreed that the conservation agent would basically walk the street every week for the rest of the season to take inventory of any mortality, any turtles or other animals that are dead. They really were clear they care about the Blandings turtle specifically and not turtles generally. But so Michelle has walked the site, taken photographs. She's going to continue to do that. So basically, we're building out some data on what is going on from a kind of roadkill or mortality rate. We have a site visit with Fish and Wildlife later this week, so that'll be good to get them on the site. We've also reached out to Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program to find out what's the latest information they have in their files, because that's part of where our files just kind of fall off a cliff after a certain point. And we want to make sure that anything that we're doing is in compliance with any expectations they may have set years ago. So we've been looking at files, also looking at kind of institutional memory on our side in terms of the road grading and what standards that needs to be done to, and whether that needs to be communicated to Natural Heritage ahead of time. So and I know Chief Dwyer is looking at some of the suggestions that have come in regarding signage and speed bumps. I've met with Butch on this a couple of times, and I put him in touch with Dwyer because Dwyer definitely thinks it would be helpful to get additional signage for emphasizing the weight limit. So he's working with Butch on figuring out exactly what signage, when, and where that would go. So, when it comes up again for the board, yeah.
Okay, just a quick comment. Maybe the DPW could just make sure all the signs are visible, fully visible from as far away as possible. When I was out there a week or two back, I noticed that visibility is somewhat compromised of some of the signs because of growth.
Yeah.
Michelle did talk to Butch about that.
Okay.
Someone had made that comment to her as well. And she
Great.
knows out there, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that, Angus. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, we'll have a more kind of complete update at the next time the board discusses it, including response to the specific suggestions that the board had kind of shortlisted at the prior meeting. But for tonight, we just wanted to let you know that there's kind of the field reconnaissance going on. There's the upcoming site visit and, you know, the gathering background documents and correspondence with a couple of state agencies. I have also put together, you know, we've been doing cost estimating on what the regrading is, so I'll have that to report at this meeting.
All right,
Great, thanks.
Middle Street.
Middle Creek Bridge, you saw, you know, the bad news. We did not get a further extension of the 2019 MassWorks grant. Bad news, but it was not a surprise. We knew that was kind of a long shot because we weren't able to set a clear expectation that the work would be complete in FY24. In fact, we had no expectation it would be. So we applied because the grant administrators urged us to do so. But we did not get the extension. The response time for the other two grant applications were submitted. One is a new MassWorks grant and one is the Mass DOT Small Bridge Grant. We won't hear about either of those for a couple of months. So it really, this is on just for closure as to the extension request, because we actually, you know, that was not one where we got the letters of support. We didn't do the full court press on that. The letters of support came in for the two grant applications, both of which I think were very strong. We did learn the city of Newburyport did not actually apply for the MassDOT Small Bridge Grant, even though the consultant had done all the work. All they had to do was sign and submit.
They intentionally did not supply, or
It
they?
sounds like they were very, very busy and overlooked it.
So this is the thing you're never gonna catch up on because the price is so extraordinary.
Yeah.
The funding's not there, we
Right.
can't afford it.
Right.
Is there some alternative plan for a repair rather than a whole replacement? It's gotta be something. You just can't leave the thing closed. I mean, every time I walk by there, I'm thinking, suppose you just dropped the concrete form, either side, poured it and filled it and said, good enough. I mean, it's oversimplistic, but to replace the whole bridge is one process. There's gotta be something.
I think the door has to be closed on replacing it until we retain.
The door is closed, we just don't know yet. How many millions are we off? I mean, even if you get all your grants,
Couple million.
and if Newburyport kicks in, you're still off millions. It's not 100,000 or
That's right.
ARPA money that's gonna patch anything. It's
That's
it's
right.
a staggering number. And that number to come up with out of West Newbury is probably impossible. So.
Well, let's see if we get this grant. We'll go from there.
I can hear the door slamming right now.
Well,
Again, I just think we have to look at alternative plans for that bridge. There's gotta be some kind of repair process versus replacement that could be fractionally expensive, less expensive.
The problem is you have to bring it up to standard, you know, current bridge requirements, you know, if you do repair on it. So.
Yeah, Chris, you're working in a wetland, you're working in a public water supply. I mean, there's a whole host of complications. We kind of, believe it or not, we actually thought about this, you know, 3 years ago. And you know, we really tried to consider, is there a cheapo way to do this? And I don't think we're going to come up with a cheap way to do it.
Yeah, there's some background, Chris, at some point I can, wouldn't be this week because I'm pressed with being on vacation next week, just getting some things done, but there's a lot of background in the 2018 era, when I was brand new, and a lot of things that culminated in a big meeting we had down in Arlington at the district office, and at that time, the board was really pushing, could we do a Bailey Bridge, which is just like an overlay, and we went into that meeting and at the state, which probably, I think there must have been 18 people at the meeting, including probably 10 from different state agencies, well, really from DOT. And they poured a lot of cold water on that based on basically the needs for structural engineer to certify the integrity that all the guardrails have to be tested at certain, or, you know, meet certain ratings for, impact resistance and so forth, and, there really was not a path to a lower cost fix, but I hear your point. Obviously, everyone knows that the price tag for this thing is very much disproportionate to this town's ability to pay, and you know, there is, I don't know about how realistic it would be, but a scenario where the town fronts it and then tries to recoup that money from Newburyport and through, there's a section of Mass General Law that we can try to hang our hat on, asserting their obligation to pay half the cost, but that would be a long road. and
Even what's in that, what are you, 4 point something million at this point?
Yeah.
Versus, you know, we're gonna have water infrastructure page, I just don't see how that's ever gonna happen.
I think we need a ferry service.
What's that, Rick?
We need a ferry service.
Yeah, you need a boat just long enough to park in the middle.
You just park where you got, in one side out the other. That'd be cheaper than a bridge.
Right.
But we do know from all those letters of support we got, there are a lot of people counting on us, so we just keep doing what we can.
Do they have money?
Next item, I included the update from the website, but I did want to make the board aware, this is on the MBTA communities planning process, that the next planning board meeting, or I don't think it's the next one, but the meeting on August 15th is shaping up to be a pretty big meeting with regard to this initiative, following on the workshop they had at the end of June. The designers have been doing conceptual planning for the different study areas. And so that's going to be made available for the August 15th planning board meeting. So for those people who are keeping a close eye on this process, that's a pretty important meeting. I've got it in my calendar.
What time?
They meet
Usually start at 7.
So,
I would imagine this would be first.
yeah. Then the next item is somewhat related, and I might have overstated things in the reference to a land use summit. I gather that's generated some, conversation in town as to, is this going to be like the end all be all and to solve all our land use questions? It's really not. What it is I've been talking for a while with both Sue Brown, the town planner, and Christine Wallace, the project manager for DPW, that between the corridor work and the major effort that's being made there with TEC and the MBTA communities, which is also a major effort, and also this water study, which is a major thing. Those all have a land use infrastructure component. They all will not only benefit from, but necessitate significant public input. And so the thought was, especially on the first two where there's public meetings built into the consultant scopes, the thought was if we had a single kind of bigger meeting and try to create a center of gravity where we want everybody to be there, not, for instance, with the MBTA communities, you may get some, but you're not going to get others. The idea is if we put more items on the agenda and then facilitated it in a way that allowed kind of people to touch on different topics with breakout sessions, that might be a really good way to, like I said, to create a center of gravity, get as many people there as we can with different topics. And so the couple of topics I mentioned are the thought, but there could be others. I mentioned this to Michelle today. She actually asked me about it. And I guess there's been some discussion among the Open Space Committee of what's this all about? They saw the agenda and she asked, could that be a potential opportunity to gain public discussion of a wetlands bylaw? And we talked it through, and potentially it could. There is a point at which you overburden it and therefore dilute the value for everybody. So we have to be very thoughtful about that. But the initial subjects that I've mentioned aren't, limiting. And we've talked about different visual exhibits that we could put together to set up around the annex that would help to convey to those in attendance, not just the couple of things we're talking about, but the range of things that are ongoing. So just use it as an opportunity for people to have a, better understanding of all the things going on. Maybe do some posters and to illustrate not just, kind of snapshots of what's going on, but how people can learn more, how people can get involved, have handouts. We're just trying to take advantage of the fact that we've got a lot going on. We've finally, after a long time, we actually have the staff horsepower to put together something like that. So at a staff level, there's some excitement that if we kind of, put all our energy toward a big, we call it land use summit, that might be overstating it, but hey, it got people talking, so I guess that's, it's already some value. So the suggestion has been October 4th or 5th. I don't know if the board, wants to have a thought on either of those dates. I wanted to stay away from the following week where it's the holiday week. I don't know if people take any time off in October, probably not, but it seemed like the 4th or 5th was.
And that's a Saturday?
I know those are like I was thinking of Wednesday and Thursday. The thought was to get something kind of after the, flurry, even though we'll still be preparing for fall town meeting, the flurry of meetings should be largely over by then.
Yeah.
And it's, far enough ahead of the town meeting, so that's not set. I know Sue's gonna be talking about that with the planning board, but this has really come together, pretty quickly. I made the suggestion, probably 6 weeks ago that, hey, we should think about trying to overlap some of these meetings. And then it was really just last week, Christine and Sue were meeting and they reached out to me, said, hey, we're meeting on this. And so I ended up meeting with them and they're pretty excited about like working toward, something that touches on a couple of major topics. So.
Great, sounds good.
So, I want to let you know, it's very much at the discussion stage, but that's why it's on under updates.
Right.
It's not looking for any specific action. The next item, work with MVPC. Obviously, we're doing this 113 corridor planning and TEC is the consultant for that, but it's totally separate and independent from that. MVPC, they have a couple of transportation planners and they had initiated a meeting with us that I want to say was about 2 weeks ago. It was since your last meeting. I think it might have been the day after your last meeting. And it's been, 13 days. So my memory's a little hazy, but I remember it was a very good meeting and a very substantive meeting. And we did a share screen and we were walking them through all of the things we're doing with regard to the corridor. Which I think was really helpful because even though we sent them memos and we'd sent them background, it was really helpful to talk about it and to have that visual. And this is basically all toward the path toward actually getting one or more projects listed on the tip in the future, which has been our objective right along with this corridor study. So we talked about in some detail each of the nodes that we identified along the corridor that warrant greater focus on pedestrian, crosswalks and pedestrian safety. And, we try to give MVPC some direction on, what kind of how we see things coming together, for instance, with the earmark that we still have for, that we looked at for the town center for traffic calming and pedestrian improvements. But we talked about, each of the schools. I shared my, real concern with regard to the middle high school and the fact that crosswalk is going to go away and be relocated off the street, which I think is very impractical. So we got all of that on their radar and they seem to think they could maybe help get MassDOT's attention to look at whether they themselves, whether Mass DOT could advance, something like getting a crosswalk or a rapid flasher beacon down at the middle high school, which is what I had proposed back in 2018. But by that point, the school project had already gone,
Yeah.
you know, so anyway, it was a good meeting. It's all, this stuff's all incremental progress. Nothing happens right away, but it definitely it was a substantive meeting, and I just wanted to review all on it, so. The next item, this is an initiative that had been kind of talked about for a long time, and Jim's office with Max really kind of took the reins and put together, I think, a really cool draft. So I wanted to share this, get the board's thoughts on this, and I think we would, you know, prior to kind of publishing anything and getting it printed up in a hard copy, we would definitely recirculate it among the town departments, make sure we've got everything accurate and there's nothing that we've missed. We're not trying to be comprehensive, but we're trying to touch on the things that residents, especially new residents, would want to know. But I think that once we finalize it, I would envision, like, you know, printing nice, you know, high gloss kind of color pamphlets. So we want to do something that's durable. It's going to be just as relevant in a couple of years than it would be in the first week.
Sounds good. So would it be like a booklet? I mean, this is how many pages here?
6.
Yeah, so it's kind of similar to Christine's like senior newsletter that she
Oh,
does.
okay, yeah,
That's what we're envisioning, like,
yeah,
mail it out, just fold it in half,
I see.
put a sticker on it.
Yeah, I think it looks great. I mean, my only thought was to have the individual committees review this that are mentioned, just to make sure.
Oh, yeah,
Sure people
that-
can stuff the website, but,
Yeah.
He also is, I know he's talked to Christine, I know he's talked to, I don't know how in-depth this conversation will fall into anymore, but he's definitely, this is not like a first draft by any means. He's actually had this, a couple people review that for.
yeah.
I had a bunch of markups and comments. I don't know, if I want to go through them and just hand it to you.
If you want to hand them off, we're a ways away from finalizing something. I just wanted to include something on tonight, just to make you aware what's kind of going on in the background. Yeah, yeah,
Something light at the end of,
Huh?
it's something light at the end of the meeting.
Well,
yeah.
yeah, to sit there and say, let's, you know, craft this is not, there's a few things that are missing. Like Parks and Rec, there's no mention of that, sports, Pike State Hill and the equestrian. I'll give you my.
Okay, yeah.
And the first thing I thought it should start with, this is gonna sound corny, like a welcome message from either Angus or the select board, you know, welcome to West Newbury, because just explain a little what the town is about, just literally a paragraph, not a.
You don't think bill pay is our?
So I reorganized where they all should go. I'm sure it's.
Yeah, that's good. He put them in alphabetical order because in the front page it says A to Z. And so he tried.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything but bill pay, anything.
Well, no, don't.
No, but
Bill pay to collections.
I got a lot of games. I just, you know, trash recycling, you know, beware when you buy a house, there should be a bin there. If there's not, you bought a new house, you gotta acquire a bin, that's not in there.
Yeah,
Same, it talks about water bills. You might not even get a water bill, you know, and my suggestion, if you're not getting a water bill on your well, you might wanna have your water tested when you move in, just again.
yeah, that's great, that's great.
I'll pass it down, and you can.
Yeah, that will take any and all input, and yeah, I think we're, you know, we're definitely a few rounds away from having a final. But I definitely felt it was far enough to let you guys know what.
I don't like the alphabetical. I think it ought to be done in the essence of West Newbury. What's the priority and the flow and things like that.
Yep.
I mean, to hit you with the bill pay first is kind of like, oh, thanks, welcome, give us your money.
I believe he was trying to be clever.
I really like the layout of it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
It's really neat looking.
yeah.
yeah.
He designed the whole thing.
Yeah, very nice, very attractive.
So, what software did you use? Is it desktop publishing? Like
It's the
Publisher?
same one Christine uses, actually, I'm not sure what it's called,
I forget what Canva?
that sounds right.
Canva.
Yeah.
Nice.
So if Matt looks at mine, like, what the hell was he saying here? Call me up and.
I'll give you a number.
Great. Okay, Oh, and then, yeah, next item is, continuing to work on, investment management, RFP. I did have a really, good discussion last week with, both Chris Wild, the outgoing chair of the committee, who's not technically reappointed, but I do think as it all plays out, is probably going to, want to reconsider, resume, as well as with Mark Madden. I had shared with them a draft RFP that we put together that still needs some work, but has made some progress. And we've talked a fair amount about what the objectives of the committee are, what they should be, how that can best align with the kind of reality of the treasurer collector's office, who's the one who's kind of statutorily charged with overseeing the various investments. And so we'll have a follow-up call. Caitlin was out on vacation last week, but we agreed we'd have a follow-up call later this week. Just a daytime call, and then they've posted their first meeting. They hadn't met since February, largely because of the lack of progress in our RFP. They felt there wasn't much to talk about. So Lark sent over a note today. They posted August 10th for a meeting. So we're looking to make some real progress on that. And I did talk with them about, and with Wendy about getting them onto one of probably the second August agenda, the 21st, to really kind of revisit, charge and scope, and make sure that we're hopefully in alignment on how they can best help, because they are really just trying to help. But there's also a lot of nuance to municipal kind of investment management that not all of the private sector insights will translate, but they know that they know what all people are.
So I had sent that questionnaire to Lark.
Okay.
And proposed August 21st.
Great.
But I also asked Rob, the finance committee, on that day. I'm wondering if 2 committees per meeting is too ambitious. I don't know. I mean, I was not wanting to drag this out for
I don't
6
think
months.
the 2 per meeting is ambitious, but the follow-up work could be,
Yeah.
as we just saw tonight. So
Yeah.
back it down to 1, at least.
Yeah, that's right. So far, we're two for two in terms of bylaw revisions. We're really on a roll.
Yeah. So,
Well, and Rob correctly pointed out that the 5-day advance in the finance committee bylaw is dated, so there's no.
Oh, my God,
If you
yeah.
really want to be thorough, that.
Yeah, and plus, we actually are in 2 sections. for
Yes,
some
I know,
ideas,
it's
and
odd. It is odd.
You can see that there's been at least 20 different people with 20 different opinions on how to format bylaws.
Yeah.
Throughout the town. Very odd.
so I guess we're getting ahead to follow-up meetings, but should we keep those 2 on for the 21st?
I think so. I think finance committee, that's definitely timely, because it's
Yeah.
right before, the cycle starts. And I know the FinCom was looking to kind of meet with the board to bookend,
Yeah.
in terms of what
Right.
you're hoping to get done. what
Bump
they're hoping.
anybody, bump the other guy.
No, I already offered it.
Oh, okay, well,
Okay, and then for August 7th, the Community Preservation Committee, we went through the questionnaire, so
Oh, good.
that's done.
Okay,
I'd like to have the Affordable Housing Trust at the same meeting, but we're not meeting before then, so I'm still trying to figure that out, but those would be 2 light ones.
that's good to see your chair.
I know. So after that, I mean, we had talked about having committees with similar, like open space, Mill Pond. I think that's gonna be too much to, try to get 3 committees in 1 meeting, with all the other stuff going on, but at least this is the next few meetings.
I think the natural, Rick's pointed out, like, energy and sustainability.
Yeah, those 2 are natural.
Historical commission and historic district, those are easy. I think there will be ones that just need to be their own meeting.
Yeah,
So, hey, that reminds me, I actually had a really, really nice meeting on Friday with Jill Hudson of the Historic District Commission. She had reached out with a couple of ideas on the training field, so we met out there on Friday. We ended up meeting for, probably 45 minutes or more. Really good discussion. I hadn't met her before. She's full of energy and a really, really positive person. So I briefed her on some things like regarding the Page School study and sent her some follow-up and said, share this with everyone who might be interested. So anyhow, they are gonna have some specific proposals, which would be under the select board's oversight with regard to the training fields, some of the landscaping. And so, they're gonna take some time to formulate that, and have some more specifics to propose, but she reached out to me kind of wanting to know what process to follow. And they'd also like to, unfortunately with Dot's passing, the district commission no longer has a resident of the historic district as a member. And so, she's gonna write like a letter, and I said, just send it to us, we can send it to everybody in the district and, do the mailing labels or whatever to try to solicit a resident of the historic district to be part of the commission.
Does that include across the street on the townhouse side?
Yep.
Yeah, it actually goes a little bit past, the training field both ways, and then I think up, is it Main Street?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it goes up a little bit as well.
okay.
So Ray Cook is a resident.
I wasn't gonna mention that.
So, but they also have, between the historical commission and the historic district commission, well, I'll just say the historical commission. They have a couple of, they've completed two major projects recently.
Yeah.
One with the repainting and restoration of the old town hall, which came in under budget. We've gotten mixed reviews. It seems like the majority of people really like the new look. There are some people that ready to get back to and then also the completion of the phase 3 on the historic property survey. So, I've made an invitation to them if they want to present that at a future meeting. It would be good to bring some more attention to that work.
So maybe we could take those two committees in September.
Mhm.
Send them.
Yeah.
That was the other thing I noticed on that welcome guide, the photo of the town hall on the last page.
It's already out. Oh, and do you want to just brief on the photo initiative? Because Max has been getting tons of.
Really?
Great, yeah.
People are sending in photos?
A lot. Yeah.
Because I have millions of great photos, but. He
Hold
says,
on.
yeah, because if you send them in, you get no credit, the town owns, them. You're not gonna own it, it's not even legal, so I'm not biting at that.
Yeah.
I've got some magnificent photos you'll never get.
No, it's Max, like, rightfully so, you wanna make sure you have updated recent photos of the town, so you can, if we ever wanted to do, photos on welcome packets or on future town reports or anything like that, he's gotten quite the collection. And as Lisa pointed out, most of the pictures she took are the ones that are on the website, so like maybe other people's photos can make to the website, things like that.
Great.
We do, I know, Chris, you know this, and Rick certainly knows this, having been chair in the past, but Wendy and I do keep a running list of future items, so actually, there was a time that I would actually send that out as a list under future agenda items, just so all board members are at least aware of what's coming down the pipe. It's rough. I mean, it's just,
I sent her my list when I first got on, she said, I'll add it to the list. So
Yeah.
I knew this is business, and you've got more than enough to deal with, so whatever you throw at us, we'll deal with.
Great.
Okay. In terms of items for next agenda, we are going to talk about the goals.
Yep.
So
Kind of goals.
the
Oh.
spreadsheet. So if you can
Priorities.
get, priorities. If you can get your priorities to me by, let's see, packet will go out, say Thursday. You can get them to me by August 3rd. Does that work? And then I'll compile it so they can go into the packet. Does that work, Angus? You're not gonna be back.
I'm not gonna be here, so.
So if I can just send it to whoever is compiling the packet for you?
Yeah, if you send it to Jim and Rebecca.
Okay.
Jim will also be.
Oh, right.
Rebecca.
Rebecca and Max will be running
Yeah,
the
you'll
show.
be out of the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so August 3rd, is that doable?
I got it done, I just hadn't found the Excel, now
All right.
I found the date, I'll find that and do it. tonight.
Awesome, okay. You on it, Rick?
I will do my best. I
That
am
is
not
not
back.
a commitment.
It is, it's just
I'm not back until the 2nd and, but I will, probably be doing it on a plane.
Okay, sounds good. All right, anything else? Hearing nothing. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you.